Yes, there it is. Morning, members. This is the Planning Committee for Friday, the 8th of September. As usual, please remember to turn your microphones on and off and try and speak clearly, because the great British public out there is listening to this. I think the first item we have on the agenda is the attendance record. So, Jago, would you like to start, please?
Thank you, Chair. Could members please state if they're present and if they have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Brady.
Well, I'm here. Just to say that I think most of us have had an email from Mr. Bellivanus in relation to the Top Riley application. I had some correspondence with Councillor Peter O'Brien, who was going to speak on that application after the last time it came before members. And Sir Richard Fitzherbert is also talking to that, who is, I think, known to some of us as a regular attender before the committee. Agenda item 10, I see the agent is Jane Newman, who is known to a number of members of the committee as a former employee of the authority.
Thank you. Councillor Beer.
Present.
Councillor Buckler.
Present.
Councillor Chaplin.
Present.
Councillor Hanley.
Present.
Councillor Hart.
Present. No declarations of interest apart from those that Councillor Brady was.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Present.
Councillor Huddleston.
Present. Same declaration.
We've had apologies from Councillor Murphy and Councillor O'Leary. Councillor Potter. Councillor Priestley.
Present.
Councillor Richardson.
Present.
Miss Slack.
Present. And item 9, I know the applicant, so it may be a perceived prejudicial interest, so I'll stay out of that one. And then no further declarations.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Present, and the same declarations as Chair, apart from the engagement with Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair.
That's it. Thank you very much. May I, whilst we're here, first of all introduce Councillor Matt Buckler, who is joining us for the first time from Derbyshire Dales. He is observing the planning application part of the agenda. Moving on, the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of July 2023, these have been circulated. I'm happy to move them for approval as a correct record.
Seconded.
Has anybody got any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No, in that case, I move that the minutes be approved. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you very much. Urgent business. I'm going to abuse my position as chairman to say that there are 2 bits of urgent business that I'd just like to bring up at this stage. I was entertained by my neighbour a few days back by being told that he heard that the Peak Park was being shut down. I thought it's perhaps time to just put the record straight. I'm taking this to be a cross-reference to the Secretary of State's threat to the Development Control Service. So I've asked if Brian could just update us on where we are on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so so the Secretary of State has set out that they were concerned about performance over the previous, well, say previous 2-year period. That was up to October last year. They did give an opportunity for us to show that we were making improvement on that. So we've put some data together for the previous, the last 3 quarters up to the end of June this year, and we were able to write back in July, setting out that for October to December January to March and then April to June, we were above the national standard for performance on determining what's classed as non-major planning applications within the 8-week time period. So the standard threshold is that 70% of applications should be determined within 8 weeks. You're allowed to include in that agreed extensions of time that goes into the data as well. So we've been using that facility. I can report that the October to December period, we were at 78%. January to March, we were at 81%. And April to June, we were 85%. Obviously, we still have to record the current quarter, but they only asked for the previous 3. So we've given that data, and we've also talked about what we've done in structural terms, organisational change, looking at new posts, regradings, pushing on with a performance culture. And we're also working with the Planning Advisory Service to keep that review and that momentum going. So that was a kind of story that we told back in July. And we're confident that will have a good result for us. We haven't heard yet what the outcome of the Secretary of State's decision is, but we're obviously positive about the steps we've taken culturally to work more closely with agents and really focus in on time again. From a time when we were really under the wire with gaps in staffing and the pressure on that. But we've found ways through agreements and good conversation with the agents to get an improvement started. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're still waiting for a decision.
I think that story is a very welcome one, and I think we must thank Brian and his staff for the incredible efforts they've been putting in. It was a very, very bad starting point, but the whole situation looks much more promising now, and I do hope we shout it from the rooftops that we are getting on top of these things. The second thing I'd like Brian just to briefly mention, I've heard that there is now a consultation in hand on planning policy put forward by the Communities Department, or whatever they call themselves today, which actually has the potential to have a profound effect on the national park. And I'd just like Brian, if he would, briefly to tell us what that's about.
Okay, yeah, so consultation commenced through the holiday period, so we've been all trying to catch up with that. There's a deadline of the 25th of September, which isn't long. All the national parks are motivated to respond to this because it does impact on various areas of rural planning policy, impacting on farm development and commercial development that could impact on the villages. The headline is really to support an increase in housing delivery across the country. As ever, that's a common theme, and also to support the agricultural sector. There's a lot in the consultation, upwards of around 200 questions to try and get your head around, but there's some key areas that we're focused on, and one includes the change of permitted development rights that would allow the change of use of buildings within the commercial, business and service use categories to residential, and also of agricultural buildings to dwelling houses. Now that includes the potential for barns, traditional barns to dwellings, without planning permission, without a planning application. Now we've previously gone through this debate with the government in 2014, and the national parks as a whole objected to that, and national parks were excluded from that provision. So there's the same issue really to face with that. If you imagine some national parks where the barn character is really central to their reason for designation, Swaledale, Wensleydale, and parts of this national park, if you imagine the likes of Edale and some of those regularly occurring character buildings that we see in the landscape. So it's a big concern. And the important thing is that we present data to show how many actually we can approve within our own policies. And there's a lot. You see the kind of tip of the iceberg in terms of some really difficult cases, but there are lots of approvals. And I think the important thing to say is that policies in a park allow us to control the flow of development in the right places with the right design. these kind of provisions would allow buildings to be rebuilt, in effect. You would lose that character. And it also includes portal frame buildings. It's not just traditional buildings. So the whole justification for new buildings in the first place, for agricultural purposes, then changes. You've actually got a second-hand way of getting a lot more houses in the open countryside round policy. So those cause us concern. We'll be commenting on that. There are other provisions to allow for agricultural diversification and development on agricultural units, including, I think it's up to 10 houses on a farm. So, you know, again, the purpose and character that we protect around farmsteads, with limited scope for business use, for ancillary accommodation, for farm workers, families, would go much further beyond that. And we'd like to control that through our own policies. So that's another one. And also things like the temporary use of land for markets to operate for several days, in you know, up to, it's usually, I think it's up to 60 days in a calendar year, you know, for markets in particular areas. So depending on the site and the location, you know, it's the same with the campsites and the pop-up car parks. There's a lot of new provisions being made in permitted development. We just need to look really carefully at. I think particularly those ones around the open landscape and agricultural sector. So yeah, we're working with the other national park policy officers on that, trying to get a collective voice around that, and put the data together to show what we can do powerfully through our own policies.
Is the consultation directed only at the national park authorities, or is it for everybody, as it were?
No, it's a public consultation.
Okay.
We are impacted just as others, yeah.
It would be, I think, very helpful both to members and anybody else who they may want to contact to let them know where to find that. And then anybody who wants to look at it in more detail, they could do something with it. But it is a matter, I think, of some concern if some of these things go through. Ken?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really important issue that we need to put the resources into making a comprehensive response. It does seem to me that this flies in the face of at least our first statutory purpose, to conserve and enhance the landscapes of the national park. And I think it was for those reasons that we were excluded from the 2014 proposals. I believe that National Parks England are making a response, but that national parks individually are being encouraged as well to make their individual responses. So I know the deadline is tight, but I would endorse every effort that officers can make to make our case as strongly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other members on that? No? Okay. Well, I've abused my position for long enough and we'll get back to the agenda. Agenda item 4, we have a list of public participants. Agenda items 5 and 6, which is the Magdalen Road, Meltham. I'll deal with these two both together, actually, and then we'll take the votes separately. John Keeley, you're dealing with it for us, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a brief note about the presentation. We did have a slight glitch, as you noticed, as we were setting up, which means that we don't have the latest version, so I'll have to just flick through some slides which were previously taken out of the presentation, so if you bear with me on that. So this is the application for both, well, let me start again. There's the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulation, the assessment first, and then there's the planning application. I'll do one presentation covering both, but you'll need to adopt the first one if you agree, and obviously a separate resolution on the second planning application. It was deferred from June, this case, to allow officers to check the precise route of the roadway because of concerns about the accuracy of the plans and whether some of the work was straying outside the defined boundary of the track, and also to resolve issues raised by the authorities ecologist. So as I go through, I'll cover those. But the Magdalene track, it's an unsurfaced private right-of-way which is situated to the north of the A635. This is the A635 here, Greenfield to Home Firth Road. You've got Meltham to the northeast, and the national park boundary just skirts about half a kilometre outside of this red edged area, which is the the land area to which the applicant owns. The actual area of track is the Magdalene Road goes from here on the A635 through their land to Royd in the north. And the section of track which concerns this application is between that point there and the end point there. As I said, it's unsurfaced. It has been repaired in part recently, but as you'll see as you go through the slides, some of the lower parts of the track are really badly eroded, and it's causing difficulties for the public to access that track and pass along it, and has resulted in encroachment onto the adjoining land, causing erosion, which this application seeks to address by repairing and maintaining the track. The moorland adjacent is a special scientific site of special scientific interest. It's also a special area of conservation and a special protection area, and it's also within our natural zone classification. Hence the need for the Habitats Regulations Assessment to determine whether or not the repairs and the maintenance would likely have a significant effect on the designated sites. And you'll see in the report, the HRA report, that we've identified that it does have that potential, but having carried out an appropriate assessment, subject to the mitigation in the form of the conditions and primarily the agreement and adoption of a construction environmental management plan, the scheme would not have an impact on the designated sites, and hence we can move through that HRA process to determine the planning application. The repairs to the track would use local source limestone, as well as replacing at one point a collapsed culvert. Gritstone. Sorry, did I say limestone? I beg your pardon. A slip of the tongue. Yeah. So this is an example of the material that is being used, which is appropriate in colour geologically as well. As you go through these slides, you can see that this is the top part of the track, which has been repaired in the past and is in good order. But as you go through the gate and start on the downward slopes, you can see here where particularly people on foot or horses or cyclists would stray off that track onto the adjoining land where there has been some encroachment. I'll just run through these fairly quickly just to give you a flavour of the nature of the track and some of the conditions that it faces. So the actual legal width is 7.22 metres of the actual roadway which the owners have a right of access over, the occupation road, whereas the bridleway legally is only 2.4 metres wide. You can see here again where people have strayed off the track to the left there. And sorry, I had reordered these, but as we move down the bottom of the track, you can see where the condition gets much worse, making it difficult, if not impossible, for vehicles, for the owner to access the moorland, to carry out normal land management, as well as carrying out restoration works, which they're doing in conjunction with Natural England. So, as I said, some of the works involve infilling some of these wheel ruts with the sandstone to leave a central grass margin, and it's clear that although the work stopped partway through the works, this has resulted in some concern from local people about the condition of the works and the impact on the landscape. But that was on the basis of the works had been partially completed using sort of larger stone pieces. The final finish will be 20 mil down to sort of dust to give a appearance much like the top of the track. No habitat either side will be lost now, as we're satisfied that all the works are within the bounds of this track. The works wouldn't cover the full width of the legal accommodation lane. They don't need the full 7.24 metres to be surfaced. All they're doing is a vehicle wheel tracks, which will be considerably narrower than the legal width of the track. So in terms of the works themselves, that's the area of previous works. It's very difficult for you to pick up on this on the in an environment like this, but the works comprised in yellow, you can probably just pick that out. The yellow is where they're having to do some stone infilling of the ruts, and there's some red sections where they would have to scrape back to level the surface a little bit, where it's become deeply rutted, to make sure there's a passable route. So just going through these in detail, as you go down the track, there's various sections that need differing treatment really, as you work down the track, mainly infilling to create that passable route with a little bit of infilling on the other. So the repair work is supported by Kirklees Council Rights of Way team, as it is by our own Ranger Service and our own Rights of Way team. Natural England conclude that the works will not damage or destroy the interest features of the designated area, and they don't raise any objections, subject, as I've said, to the appropriate mitigation via the Construction Environmental Management Plan. So we've got conditions to that effect, along with controlling over the timing of the works to protect the bird breeding season, and to have a sample section done so we can be, you can see from these plans it'd be quite difficult to be precise about the works. So we're having a sample section done which would act as a sort of a sample for the rest of the works to follow in terms of the quality and the extent of the work, to make sure that the minimum amount of work is done necessary to achieve the right of way and the passage for the necessary vehicles, but no more than that. And that's obviously in the interest of protecting the character of the lane and the landscape. So in conclusion, we conclude there's an essential need to carry out these repair works within the existing confines of the track, and provided it's properly controlled by the suggested conditions, it won't have a harmful effect on the site, and therefore officers recommend approval, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members? Oh, we've got a speaker, have we? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Right. Okay, Mr. Howard. Where is he? Here we are. Mr. Robert Howard. Yes, sorry, thank you very much. Would you come to the microphone in front of you, please? You press it on the left-hand side. Yeah. And you have 3 minutes in which to address us.
Oh dear. We were told 10 minutes.
No, 3 minutes.
Well, that's a little disappointing, because I mean this matter's gone on 3 years now, and okay, I'll try and do my best. What I have got, we submitted a lot of documents recently and pictures what have not appeared on the planning portal, and I do have quite a lot of pictures with me. We have a statement, but I don't think there's time to read it all. As said, it's a private carriage road. The enclosure awards, Meltham 1832 enclosure awards, are very relevant. They're very detailed enclosure awards. They actually detail responsibilities and obligations for repairs of the jointly set out private carriage road and bridleway. The landowners occupiers are responsible for repairs of the private carriage road, and the council, Meltham Town Council, as was superseded by Kirklees, responsible for the bridleway repairs. Now, when we started this work, the bottom end of that road had got in a mess due to water and also erosion, and also our conservation works bringing machinery and particularly tractors, and it had all washed out. Now, we consulted the Peak Park document about tracks and planning, and we did our assessments, and we concluded we don't need planning permission because this is existing, and the documented enclosure responsibilities are clear, and it also includes the water courses. We're responsible to maintain water courses, and there is Hardy Moss to Ramsclough Watercourse, crossing Roydon Bradshaw Road. And let's just be clear, in the enclosures, that was the name of the road. Some point in history, it was changed to Magdalen, not Magdalene, Magdalen, that's how we say it. So we started work to do the repairs because it was in a mess, to put it back into a good state, and our intentions all along to make it fit for our purposes and then finish off so the bridleway will be in good condition again. And then Kirklees Council jumped on us basically and said, stop work immediately. And we said, why? We're trying to put this right. No, you've got to stop. And then a few weeks later, Peak Park came, a gentleman, Andrew Cook, came to visit. We had a discussion, we showed it him, and then a few weeks later we received an email saying you need planning permission. And that's where we're at, and 3 years down the line, this is where we are now. This picture is on your portal of what was sent in by someone saying what it looked like before we started the works at the bottom end, which is the north-east end. This is a very old picture. We don't know where this has come from, but this is extremely old. Kirklees Council, some years ago, approximately 2011, did some bridleway repairs at the bottom on this part of the route. And I do have pictures, if you excuse me, of what it looked like after Kirklees Council did their works. That's one of them. Now, this picture wasn't taken for the track, it was taken for the notice on the gate because we had problems with motorcyclists. But there's clearly a stone surface put down by the council. After their repairs, they also installed some very small pipes, which weren't doing any good regarding moving the water where the water needs to be. There is another picture somewhere, what we found on Google by a gentleman who takes pictures of moving tracks. Excuse me. I'm trying to be as quick as I can. Here we go. This is on Google Images. This is 2013, which is, to my estimates, approximately a year after Kirklees did their bridleway repairs. Now, if you look at that picture and you look at that picture, we were accused of, by Mr. Cook, of fundamentally altering the character and appearance of the route. That's what it was many years ago. That's what it was when Kirklees did their works on the bridleway, and it deteriorated after we'd been doing lots of conservation work, and we had a serious downpour in winter that washed a lot of this section away. And if you look at it this year now it's grown in, and this is where there's been stopped and we haven't completed. It's all grown in. So, you know, when you look at these pictures, we haven't changed anything. It's a stone road, and we're repairing it with the appropriate sandstone as Natural England has always advised. And this is not the first track we've repaired. We've been in consultation many times with Natural England. We've had routes where they've been in a mess to do the conservation work, and they've simply said, as long as you use sandstone, keep it to that's fine. So that's why we started doing what we did, and then we were stopped. And then this whole process has basically gone on and on and on. And we've submitted lots of documents that's not appeared on the portal, and lots of these photographs. So, you know, if you look at parts of it higher up, it's a stone road. The whole length of it is a stone road. And all we're doing is repairing a stone road with stone. We're not altering anything. The water courses were culverts which had collapsed, and all the water washed down and washed it away, and we've put pipes in.
Mr. Howard, can I just ask you this? You have a couple of reports in front of you, which
Yes.
you will have read.
The John Scott report,
The two reports that the officers have done, they're recommending that this be approved.
yes.
You're happy with that, I'm taking it?
Well, we want to finish it.
Yeah.
We were 3 days off finishing the job when we were stopped.
Okay.
And we want to complete it. We want to put the part back correct with the right size stone for the bridleway. Kirklees are happy. Where there are spoil piles, that material is what came out to put the pipes in. That would all be reused to
Okay, I'm getting the
grade
message.
it and then reseed, yeah.
I'm getting the message, and I'm sure members have. Thank you for your contribution. We'll have the discussion, and if we need to come back to you, we'll ask you anything we need to know.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very happy to answer any questions and
Okay.
discuss whatever you need to discuss. Thank you.
Right,
Appreciate it.
members, you've got the two reports in front of you. First of all, are there any members who wish to make any contribution to this discussion? In that case, I'm going to start off by moving. Oh, sorry.
Could I just ask? I think I know the answer to my first question, which was to do with the provision of, is there any requirement or need for a kind of detour around the works, and will that have any impact on the SSSI, SBA, SAC, or given that the track is within that 24 foot or however many metres, 7 point whatever metres width, is there provision for people to pass the works without going into and causing any damage to the surrounding designated areas? The second question is, as Mr Howard has already mentioned, there's been washout of previous works. Is there provision within the proposals to prevent that happening again? And my third point would be a comment, is it's disappointing that Kirklees Highway Authority made no comment. They seem to have a role in this.
Okay, John?
Yes, on the first point, yes, the roadway legal width is 7.2 metres or so. There is space while they carry out the works for the public to walk around that. One of the issues is they have been walking further around that outside the line. So this will restore the position so they don't need to do that. But the nature of the works is such that they will be able to be carried out without restricting access for the public. In terms of the washout, I probably was a little bit brief in going through. There is, where the collapsed culvert is, there is provision for piping the water underneath to resolve that particular issue, which is the main issue. But providing a decent surface is going to resolve that. I'm not aware, from discussions with the case officer, that there were any other areas down the track which needed further culverting. So he was satisfied that the nature of the works would resolve the existing problems and do so in a much better manner than we've heard have been carried out so far.
Thank you, John. My comment about the washout, really, I wasn't clear whether it was just surface runoff or a culvert issue. It's just in light of increased heavy downpours that are increasingly occurring. I mean, you know, the expense of doing this work, you don't really want to see it have to be repeated and repeated.
Any other members? In that case, I'm going to move the first of those two reports, which is on page 20. The motion there is that we approve the authority's assessment under the habitats regulations. I'm moving that from the chair. Ken has seconded it. All those in favour of adopting that report? Anyone against adopting that report? And now I'll move on to the principal report, which deals with the planning application itself. Has any further comments from members on the planning application? In that case, I will move the recommendation on page 29 that it be approved. That is seconded. All those members in favour? Anyone against? Mr. Howard, that is now approved. Thank you for your time and attendance.
Thank you.
And we wish you good luck with it.
If you want to see the pictures of some of the pipes to replace the stone culverts, I'll leave them.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a personal experience, you know, I've been involved with the land for many, many years. The culverts were causing the big washout issue, and the pipes we put in are substantially bigger than the culverts. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Do
Cheers.
appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And I presume we get some communication forward. Yeah. We do have some pictures of a track we've previously repaired, if you want an example as well.
No, we're fine with it at the moment.
Okay,
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you for your time, everybody. Oh, sorry. Thank you, sir.
Right. Members, the next item on the agenda is the application at home, which is agenda item 7. Late last night we received some additional information from the applicant which needs assessing, and the applicant has agreed that it could be deferred. Are members happy to defer that to enable the information to be looked at? All those in favour? Yes? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, that is deferred. We're doing well, this agenda. Agenda item 8 has already been deferred to a future meeting because one of the parties is unable to attend. So we're on agenda item 9, which is the land at Littondale Road, Littondale. John Keeley again.
Yes, thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
and you're leaving the room. Yes, I hope you've got a good book. Oh, hold on a moment. We're ahead of time. Are there any others that we can... We can't do it. The only ones we could do is... What?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I missed that. Thank you. Yeah.
What is the problem?
No problem. No, we can do it ourselves because it's just a statement to be read out.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
Thank you.
Right, okay. Well, we're still on Littondale Road, Littondale. John Keeley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a full application for a proposed agricultural building to house livestock and isolation unit on land north of Littondale Road, Littondale. The application site is on the screen there. It's located near the bottom of Littondale, close to the junction with the road up to Tideswell. So on this plan, this is Lytton off to the right, the village, Littondale, bottom of Littondale, and this is the junction up to Tideswell. The application site is this site here in red, and is part of a field which the applicant has relatively recently acquired to add to his larger landholding, which is situated to the south of the Littondale Road. His farmstead and main group of very large agricultural buildings are sited here, about 300 or so metres south of this, on much higher ground, if you know the area. Just zooming in, the proposal is to erect a new farm shed here in the red outline here. You'll see on the photographs there are some remnants of a former shed, but that is seriously dilapidated, so we've given this very little weight in determining the current application. The proposal is for a modern monopit shed. I'll show you the pictures in a moment, which is considerably larger anyway than the previous building which stood on the site. It's a monopit shed, 12 metres long by 6 metres wide and 3.4 metres to the highest point. This would look down towards the junction, this elevation. And the other elevation, as you're coming down from Lytton, you would see the back end of the shed, a couple of roof lights and a profile sheeted roof with Yorkshire boarding to the sides. That is an amended plan from the reference in the report as well. There's a reference in the report to concrete panels which are now completely covered up by this external cladding. So that's the elevation to the road and the other elevation, and just a zoomed in footprint. The applicant has also suggested some additional landscaping, fairly basic plan showing some tree planting on the roadside and the wall side. So I'll just scoot through those because these are ancient photographs. So this is the site now, existing access, and you can see the remnants of the former dilapidated building. No new entrance is required, although obviously a new track would be required to the building, along with appropriate hard standing, etc., for its functional operation. And then from the road, looking at the existing remains. So this is the whole of this field is what's been acquired recently. And then further back, looking up towards Lytton, within the field. And then as you're going down from Lytton on the right-hand side there. In scale terms, the building, just to give you an impression, it's twice as long as a double garage, so it's like a 4 garage length, and the width of it is approximate, 6 metres is about the size of a double garage as well, to give you the impression of scale. In the officer's view, it would be highly prominent and quite visually intrusive in this open landscape, and thereby it would harm the special open quality of this part of the National Park landscape. We have no concerns about the use of the building. Clearly the farmer needs the accommodation, and our policy does allow in principle for new farm buildings provided they're functionally required, which we think this is. But more importantly, the site are close to the main farmstead or main group of buildings, which this is not. So it's contrary to that key part of that policy. Furthermore, the policy goes on to say that another arm of it is to make use of the least obtrusive or otherwise intrusive damaging location. And again, this doesn't make use of that. We would therefore have clearly supported the building had it been located up at the main farm group, but clearly not in this open location. We have noted the applicant would like to site the building in location because he's acquired the land, then also to act as an isolation unit. However, that need could equally be fulfilled up near the main farmstead and doesn't, in our view, outweigh the very strong and significant impact and harm to the landscape from the current siting. Hence the recommendation of refusal, Chair. Thank you.
Right. We have... Jacob, have you... Oh, there, Karen's doing it. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a statement on behalf of Joe Harrison, the agent for the land north of Littondale Road, Littondale. The applicant is a member of the Countryside Stewardship Scheme and High Health Scheme for the welfare standards of livestock. As part of these schemes, an additional building is required as an isolation unit for any incoming cattle to be quarantined for 3 weeks prior to joining the main herd. Ideally, this should be removed from the existing buildings and main holding so that any cross-contamination cannot occur. Should any illnesses or diseases that has not been picked up prior to purchasing be passed on to the existing herd, it could have detrimental effects on the applicant's business. This parcel of land is a relatively new addition to the holding, and given to the location of the main holding, this location will be ideal for such an isolation unit. Livestock is usually purchased in small numbers to replace sold or fallen stock. Unfortunately, we have not had much correspondence with the planning officers in regard to this building, so I've been unable to clarify any points which the officers have been unsure about. For example, the officer's report mentions the bare white concrete panels being on show. Apologies, this appears to have been a typo in the submitted design and access statement regarding concrete panels. The building will have internal walls of concrete panels. However, as shown on drawing 1066/003, the cladding will be brought down to floor levels on all sides and will not be seen externally. There will also be no fixed internal partitions. The officer's report also mentions the proposed landscaping, and this would take a number of years to become properly established. The planting proposed would be of heavy standards, so will already be over 2.5 metres tall when implemented, thus providing a good screen from the onset. If more landscaping is required, this can be looked at. These items could have been clarified with communication. The proposed building would look to use the existing footprint and area previously used for a building and livestock handling. The proposed building would remove the existing remains that currently look unsightly on the approach to Lytton Village. There are a number of isolated buildings around Lytton area, and many are on a much larger scale than that of the proposed and of a poorer design. Thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you, Karen. John, can I just be clear about one or two things? The existing building, if you took any account of it, what is its size in relation to the size of the building that we're now being asked to consider?
Let's go back to the plans. This is a historical photograph. It shows what it, well, it's a Google Street View image. It showed what it looked like, that building, when it was sort of 10, 12 years ago. I haven't got the exact measurements of that, but if you look at the plans, I'm not sure the dotted line, the dotted line is the Ordnance Survey scale of the building that stood on the site before.
Okay.
And the red line is the current proposal.
And presumably, by the looks of this, one of the photographs, there was quite a lot of building work and so forth around. Were they old walls or something?
When that building was in good order and in use, yeah, there was some ranch style sort of post and rail fencing around it, but it's clearly been falling into disrepair.
And the second question is this issue about isolating animals when they first arrive on the farm. I understand the argument, but I'm not sure that it's one I've ever heard before. Where does that stand in this equation?
Well, I think in the statement you said the applicant said ideally should be removed from the existing farm buildings. This is something that happens on virtually every farm in the Peak District when new animals are brought in. We are clear that that can be accommodated up at the main farmstead or another site and doesn't have to be here and create the landscape harm that we've identified. So it's not an unusual scenario. It just doesn't need to be, the animals don't need to be put in with the rest of the herd until that time. And we're also clear about the design and the nature of the landscaping on that other point, which was picked up by the speaker.
Okay. Members? I've got Lee and Ginny. Lee, shall we start with you?
I'd just like clarity on the landscaping proposals that we're looking at, and also on the height of the building and how that compares with the old building that was on site.
Yeah, the landscaping, we don't have much detail of that, and it's our view that the landscaping would take some time to take effect, despite going in as you know, larger than the normal sort of small whips that are normally planted. Notwithstanding the landscaping that's proposed, it would still be seen through that as an isolated building in this landscape. Height-wise, it's 3.4 metres to the highest point of the monopitch roof, which is what 13 feet, I think, in old term or thereabouts. Well, no, 3.4 metres, 12, about 12 or so, to be more accurate. The existing building that stood before looked like it had an eaves height, I would have said around about 2 metres or so, and a ridge 3.5 maybe. I would have said the overall height is not dissimilar to what was there before.
And just for clarity, sorry, it is in a slight dip, is it? The building on the landscape. I'm just looking at. It looks like
Not
it's
the road comes down.
Not especially, no. If you go back to if you go to the one that shows it in, there's a better one, isn't there? It's just about level with the road at that point.
Ginny?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This point about isolating stock when it comes onto the farm, I can quite see the point of the benefit of having a building away from the main farm. And in that there has been a building there in the past, and with good screening, I think this has got a good agricultural need. So I would support this.
Okay. Ken Smith and then Kath Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can understand the agricultural need, and John has kind of picked up the point I was going to make, that whilst it might be ideal, I just don't think it's appropriate in this particular location. We're looking at a replacement of the existing ruinous building by something that's roughly 3 times as long. We're looking at a building that is roughly the size of this boardroom, with a monopitch roof. It's completely out of character with the traditional farm buildings of the Peak District. It also impacts on the historic landscape within which it would be set. This is one of the narrow fields that's part of the medieval landscape of Tideswell Village, which is gradually being eroded over time, not least by the developed woodland that you can see in the back of this photograph. I think this adds to the clutter in the landscape, which is otherwise relatively open, apart from mature trees. I think I take the point that has been made about the need for isolation, but again, John made the point, which I would endorse, this isn't unusual for farms across the Peak District, and most farmers manage that issue in ways that don't include isolated buildings in open landscapes. I think we have to recognise the issue. If it is really an issue on the main farmstead, then I think we should be exploring with the applicant other ways of accommodating it. I just don't think this is the right place for the development that is proposed, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Kath Potter I've got next.
Well, I agree with what Ginny said. It seems to me that there is an agricultural need for this building, and if it could be dug more into the hillside and there was screening, I know Ken's shaking his head, but it is a possibility. I think there are ways and means of alleviating a big eyesore. And so I would support this, because I read recently on a farm application where I went into the file, and the farmer said that the national park seems to think more of visitors than they do of the farmers who keep the countryside as it is. So I think there's got to be a balance here, and I think Ginny hit that balance, that if we were to dig it into the hillside, that we could have an agricultural bee that was essential to the running of this farm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair,
Kath.
can I just clarify for members, there is no possibility of digging it into the hillside, I'm afraid. The land just doesn't lend itself to that. There is a possibility of more landscaping, of course, but not digging in, just for clarity.
Right, you had actually looked at that issue.
Actually, something's just occurred to me about it, but Bill, did you put your hand up? No. It's Ken.
Yeah, on section 38, it talks about a more traditional roof line. Has that been communicated to the applicant? Because the fact that there was a building there really, for me, sets a precedent saying, okay, building, people got used to having a building there perhaps 12 years ago. I can't see no reason why we don't have one now.
Well, we've not gone back formally and put that to the applicant. In the report, it points out that some of the aspects of the design could, if the principle had been accepted, could have been addressed by conditions or amended plans to give a pitched roof, which would improve the appearance, but that would do nothing to alleviate the landscape harm we've identified. So we didn't go back and specifically require amended plans, which we felt would have put the applicant to an unnecessary expense until the principle had been established.
Yeah. Actually, something that's just occurred to me as we've been talking. If this is 2.7 metres to the eaves, and I don't know which eave it is, because if it's got a monopitch roof, I presume it's the lower eave, but I don't know. And you're putting cattle in there, that seems to be a very low safety margin. I mean, it's only a little bit taller than me at eaves. If you put cattle in and they bounce up and down and try to jump over barriers and do all sorts of stupid things, don't they? It does seem a very odd building. Can I just say, I'm on the whole... Mike, let's have you first, and then I'll say something.
Sorry, I feel bad. I'm sort of cut you off in your train of
No,
thought,
it's fine.
Patrick.
I don't have a train of thought. It comes...
Yeah. Normally, I would be sympathetic if there had been a building there previously, and not that long ago either, 12 years. This building is some 3 times the size to what was there before. So what was there before must have served a different purpose. It wouldn't have been an isolation building. And I'm also struggling with the fact that a lot of farms in the area and elsewhere actually have their isolation buildings close to the main group, and not in the field, quarter of a mile down the road. So I'm really struggling to support the applicant's position on this, and maybe more towards the opposite view.
Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened very carefully. I appreciate the need to support farmers, but there's also, I think, the point's been made by a few speakers and the planning officer that, you know, it's the same position for all the farmers in the Peak District. I think that's important to bear that in mind, and that this is a very open site and would, you know, have quite an impact on that local landscape going into up Lytton Dale. So I'm not persuaded in favour of the development. Yeah.
I mean, I could see, if there was a need, a case that would make a much smaller building on the site, carefully designed, just about accommodatable because of the mess that's there now. But I have to say I would agree with the point that both of you two have made about the size of it and the monopitch roof and the whole design thing. Would somebody like to move something? You're moving? Moving the recommendation. Is that seconded? Michael has seconded it. Any amendments to that motion? In that case, I'll put the motion as on the agenda, that it be refused for the reasons stated. All those in favour of refusing? 5. All those in favour, all those against refusing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will exercise my casting vote in favour of refusal. Where are we up to with the agenda? We're now... we have a slight... well, we quite often stop at about 11 o'clock in case members want a 5-minute break. So I'm going to suggest that we reconvene at 11:05. Claire could perhaps join us in case she's needed, and then we'll go straight on to the house at Baslow. Okay. If Jane has turned up. Okay, that's all right. We'll tell her when we go out that we'll stop.
Even better.
Right, members, we're a couple of minutes over, but we can continue. I'm going to move... we'll give Jane just time to settle down, because we're still ahead of her item. I'm going to move to item 17 on the agenda, the Statement of Community Involvement, which has been before members in the full authority before now. This is to sort of get to the final crunch on it. And Claire Wilkins is going to introduce it for us.
Thanks. Statement of Community Involvement is a statutory document required by every local planning authority. National planning policy requires us to update the Statement of Community Involvement every 5 years. The document details how the authority engages individuals, local communities and stakeholders in the planning process. The document is split into two. The first part outlines the local plan making process and the second outlines the planning application process. The document was last updated in 2018 and the team are keen to have the document up to date prior to entering the formal consultation phase for the local plan review. In May 2023, authority members approved the revised document for public consultation and agreed that any minor amendments and final approval of the document be delegated to the head of planning in consultation with the chair and vice chair of the planning committee. The revised document was then subject to public consultation between 26th of May and 24th of July. 13 responses were received and the document amended accordingly. These responses and amendments are outlined in Appendix 2. Since the circulation of the committee report, a minor amendment, paragraph 6.9 of the document, to correct a reference to delegated powers as being discussed with the Chair of Planning. The Policy and Communities team asked that members agree the revised version of the Statement of Community Involvement, subject to any further comments, and that approval of the revised version be passed to the Head of Planning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Thank you very much. If I can just explain that to members, if you turn to page 181 of the agenda, paragraph 6.9, if you're not very careful, that paragraph reads that if a parish council objects to a planning application, we'll never approve it. Now, that's not what our policy is. And I've suggested a form of wording to Claire that will overcome that problem and make it clear what our existing practice under the delegation scheme is. Right, members, both Martin and Matt are able to take part in this discussion if they wish to do so. Any members of the committee have anything to say? Ken, really?
I knew it would be a surprise, Chair. But a further surprise is I've spotted a few typos and things that I'll maybe share with Claire and Brian outside of this meeting. But a couple of queries. In the table on page 180, the first and fourth elements of the notification requirement says that we will advertise these applications in the relevant local newspaper. And I'm aware that some organisations have stopped that process because of the cost and just use website. And I wondered whether there was a legal requirement to do that or whether it was just something that we are running with. That was the first question. And then the second and final one, I hope you'll be pleased to hear, paragraph 611, the first sentence that says applications will be approved with the conditions, refused or can be withdrawn by the applicant or agent. We have also deferred applications for further information. Is that is this meant to be a comprehensive list, or should that be added, or is that just not an issue?
I think I can easily deal with that last one, because that is not about what the committee does, it's about what the authority does. So I don't think deferring it really becomes into that list, actually. I think it reads okay on its own. If it was about what the committee does, then it would be okay. It's an interesting one about the public notice. I always thought you had to be in newspapers.
Yeah, that was my understanding. We passed it through the admin team who deal with those, and they were happy. But I can ask the question, look into it further.
Andrew Hart, are you an authority on this?
No, but I am conscious that I would prefer us to continue the practice to advertise in local newspapers, because they are part of the heritage of the Peak Park, their locality, and many of them are under tremendous pressure, and people do look to the, usually in my case, the Biddle Chronicle, which is page 1 is where all the, page 2, the inside page, is where all the advertisements from local authorities there. They do keep newspapers going, and they are a point where people can easily access the information.
Yep.
So I would prefer that we continue to do that. Thank you, Chair.
I totally accept that point. Any other members got any comments? Martin?
Right. Over the Peak Park Parishes Forum.
Which page are you on?
It's item 2.6.3, which is on
which page?
Page 170.
Okay.
My reading of 2.6.3 is that the Peak Park Parishes Forum is invited to comment and make representations on items which the authority consults the Peak Park Parishes Forum. This is not a comment on the current or previous management of the management of the authority, but it could be used by a benign authority to stop management to stop the Parishes Forum commenting on things that they don't want them to comment on. I would prefer a slight modification of the wording that would say that the Parishes Forum can raise matters of interest to or concern of the parishes as a group to the authority, because this is a means by which the authority can be informed of concerns.
Can I put that my way around and see whether we're saying the same thing? What you're saying is that the PPPF can comment on things whether or not they are consulted.
Yes.
That's you understand the point that's being made. We'll find a form of wording that reflects it.
Chair, if I may, that for me, that 2.6.3 doesn't preclude PPPF making comments.
But I think we can clarify it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Right. Any other members got any comments on that? In that case, I'm happy to move this from the chair, subject to those two changes and any others, and all the spelling mistakes that Ken is going to draw to our attention shortly. All those in favour?
Chair, not only that, but also where you've located Barnsley on page 168. If it's that little white spot, it's a bit too far north.
It's a right door.
I think you're in Leeds, aren't you? I take it you don't have a very busy life that you're able to...
I had a rather long train ride yesterday.
Thank you for drawing that to our attention. All those in favour of approving this consultation, this document? Anyone against? No, that is approved subject to those alterations we need. Thank you, Claire. Right, we're now on to planning application for Newby House, Overlane, Baslow. We are slightly ahead of time. Are you happy for us to proceed? Good, okay. And it's agenda item 10 on page 75 of the agenda. Right. John?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a full application for Section 73, which is a variation application of an existing planning consent for alterations and extensions at Newby House, Overlay in Baslow. The application site is on the screen behind me. Newby House is a detached house on the northern edge of Baslow. This is the property grounds here. It's accessed from the A623, just north of Baslow Hall, formerly Fisher's Restaurant. There's a driveway which comes up from the A623 and also connects all the way through to Over Lane. Also provides access to the adjoining bungalow in front of the site. As I said, we are right on the northern edge of the village of Baslow, with open countryside to the north, east and west, Baslow Hall and further residential development to the south there. And we saw on site yesterday that, and you can see indication here, that the grounds of the property are well mature landscaped, and there's some significant tree cover such that you don't see the property from the road below. The property's been significantly extended in the past to create this double projecting bay form, the conservatory to the rear and a garage sited to the north. Following a design refusal in 2022, planning permission was granted subsequently for a replacement garage, replacement conservatory, hip to match the house, lean-to extensions on the north and south of the house, as well as alterations to the fenestration, including a large glazed opening on the rear. The current planning application, as I said, is a section 73, is to vary that consent to allow amended plans showing a different design and layout. Essentially, remodelling the extensions with a more contemporary flavour. So we have the proposal is to demolish the existing garage, which sits there, and erect a new garage in this location here, which is more appropriately located to the driveway. We have no concerns about the garage, which is acceptable. See here solar panels on the roof. There is also, as part of the previous scheme, ground source heat pump and water management tank there within the grounds of the property. The main concern relates to the form of the extensions to the house. So the existing conservatory is demolished, and the application today seeks permission to relocate the conservatory, pushed a little bit further north. We saw on site 2.8 metres beyond the gable, and we'll see in the elevations it has a different form, and more of a garden room than a conservatory replacement. The applicant explained on site yesterday the existing conservatory was just simply too hot to use and be comfortable. And the extensions to the north and south, slightly larger than the lean-to ones that we granted before. And in addition, the bay windows to the front, which are currently tiled, would be have a different zinc roofing material. So I'll go through that on the elevations. So a few slides to show the character of the existing house. So this is the double bay front. Driveway comes up on the right-hand side. The side view, looking from the drive, so we have one proposed extension here. You see the conservatory and the garage in the background. Proposed garage would be just to the right of this right-hand side car. From the rear garden, so this is the garage which will be removed. Conservatory replaced by a garden room, pushed a little bit to the right, and the replacement garage is just to where this car would be on the left-hand side. And the north gable elevation, this chimney and the chimney slightly behind it would be removed as well as part of the proposals, and has already been granted. And a couple of renders, 3D renders, which helps with the orientation. So this is from the sort of the northwest looking back, and you start to see here how the changed design introduces a more contemporary feel to the extensions. The previous conservatory had a hip roof, and now it's proposed that this would be a low-pitched zinc roof with a roof light in the centre. Stone walls and I think, aluminium frame windows. The side extensions pick up the same roof theme, similar low zinc pitch roof, glazing, stone-based walls, and you have these vertical aluminium fins which act as a little bit of a sunscreen. I say the garage, back of the garage there. Looking from the garden straight back at the house. You can see the glazed slot, which there was a glazed slot approved before this one, just see some amendments to that. This would have vertical projecting fins, keeping that vertical emphasis. And as you look from the drive, see the other side extension and the zinc roofing to replace the existing tiles. So just very quickly, layout, I won't dwell too much on these, that's the existing ground floor plan. This, unfortunately, with the change to the presentation, we've still got all the previous approved ones in, so again, I won't dwell on those, but just for a very brief comparison. But I would make the point we're not choosing between what was approved and this as a preference. The current application needs to stand on its own merits. And the proposed ground floor plan and existing first floor plan and the approved scheme, which again showed the hip roof. This scheme, I should point out, there's some accommodation in the first floor of the garage and the roof space, and there's also a ground floor basement. There are no concerns about that. You see from the report, the officer's main concern is about the design of the extensions. So, existing floor. I'll move quickly through these because there's not a lot to pick up and move to the elevation. So that's the existing elevation you see from the photograph. The approved scheme was just simple lean-tos, and that comparison with the proposed elevation. The officer's concern is that these extensions, particularly in the roof form and the use of the vertical fins, doesn't pay a strong enough handshake, a former colleague of mine liked to say, with the local building tradition or with the character and appearance of the existing house. And as a result, they are out of keeping, hence our recommendation of refusal solely on design grounds. There's a minor change to the internal elevation of the projecting wings at the front, which is of no real consequence. And then the existing elevation to the driveway as it was approved, and the change now with the contemporary detailing. And the guard room, I'll call it, which is set very much in reveal, several metres back from this gable elevation, don't forget. And then existing conservatory, as we approved, and note the changes to the glazed slot in this scheme, and the extension, garden room extension pushed further north. A couple of roof lights in the roof to light the second floor accommodation, and then there's a complete with the garage in the approved version and as proposed now. And then the north side, just very briefly, as existing, as we approved before, and then the scheme that we had before us today. These are some additional ones. No concerns about the garage, so I won't dwell on that. So in summary, the extensions as revised, in our view, officer's view, they're out of keeping with the local building tradition, and more importantly, they don't reflect sufficiently the character, form, detailed design or materials of the existing house. Whilst we are supportive of contemporary design generally, in this case the scheme, as I've said, doesn't reflect enough of the existing house design in arriving at this solution, which we've concluded would harm the character and appearance of the house, hence the recommendation of refusal, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've got one speaker, which is, Jane. Welcome back. And when you're ready.
Many of you went on site yesterday and would be able to appreciate that the existing house is not a traditional Peak District building. It is an attractive and detached gritstone property from the early 20th century in a large and secluded plot. Design and appearance are always subjective and a matter of judgment to some extent, but you do have policy and guidance about design. I want to explain to you that approving the scheme is in accordance with the design guides and policy. The proposed reasons for refusal includes 3 elements: the siting of the rear extension, the roof forms and the detailed design. Officers think that the proposal does not meet the high standards of design required by local policy. The scheme has been designed by a RIBA award-winning architect who you met yesterday. He has designed a scheme that responds to the property and its setting to achieve a cohesive scheme where additions enhance the house. The report sets out that the siting of the extension is inappropriate because it is on the corner and offset from the rear. The report refers to the alterations and extensions SPD, but the text in full at this point in the SPD says that extensions on the corner are best avoided because the resultant massing is overcomplicated and at odds with the vernacular tradition. In this case, the building is not a vernacular building, so citing the offset from the corner is not unacceptable in policy terms. It's not complicating because it allows more of the rear of the host building to be revealed and avoids obscuring the upstairs windows. The report also takes issue with the roof forms. These have been carefully considered as an architectural response to the hipped roofs and overhanging eaves on the host building, which has been interpreted in a contemporary way. In terms of detailing, the scheme is contemporary and the alterations and extensions SPD outlines that contemporary detailing for an extension is a valid approach. The existing house has more glazing than traditional buildings and the use of glass in the proposed scheme references this. The use of zinc is an intentional modern detail balanced with a high degree of gritstone. The additions are deliberately not a copy of the house. They're good quality contemporary design. The scheme proposed is high quality. The additions are separate but are cohesive, ensuring that the scheme overall does not appear piecemeal. The scheme also draws upon elements of the architectural character of the host building without directly copying the form as a sort of pastiche. The proposal will be a positive addition to the house and will actually enhance it. The scheme is in accordance with policy and will conserve and enhance the positive qualities of the building and its context in the National Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, we went on the site visit yesterday. I remember from the last discussion we had that there was a division of opinion about the extensions. Any updates now from any members wish to add to the discussion? No? Nobody has a view at all? Well, Jenny.
I would agree that it's a contemporary design. And I didn't have a problem with the revised proposals. So I would recommend that we approve this.
Is that a proposal? Is that a proposal?
Recommend that we...
Now, are you actually proposing that?
I am, yes.
Okay. Other members? Can I say, I, from my own point of view, I had reservations about it when we saw it before us at the previous meeting. Because there was this issue of 2 different architectural styles trying to meet together. But actually, I think seeing it on site yesterday and seeing the location of the site in the wider landscape, I ended up not seeing a problem. So other members may have a different view. Andrew Hart, then Lydia.
Oh, well, I'm going to be the normal heretic that I am. I didn't see a problem when we saw this before. And I can't see a problem now because I don't think it does in any way breach the design criteria. I think it's a contemporary design, yes. But I've been at this game long enough to know that sometimes there are some designs which enhance. It's not normal vernacular for this particular area, and it's adding to it rather than taking away from it. And I think I heard the word pastiche, and I hate it when it's sort of it's a clone of the original house. I've seen many houses within the Peak Park where a progression's been made. And I think it's pretty sensitive enough to warrant approval. So I would second that.
I've then got Lydia, and then I have Mike Chaplin.
Not much more to add other than what Andrew said, really. I'm supportive of this, yeah.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to go on the site visit yesterday, but I just wanted to pick up on the point that James made about this building that's not in a vernacular style, and would like some comment from officers on their view about that and how they've reached the view they have, given that this is perceived to be not a building built in the vernacular style.
John?
So I'm not quite sure the point. You mean the existing house not being in the vernacular style?
Yeah.
We felt, obviously it's a more modern house than very old vernacular buildings, but nevertheless it's reflective of the local building tradition in its materials and its sort of scale massing. So we felt that had a very strong, the detail that was quite strong and quite reflective of our local building tradition, and that compared with the extensions, there was quite a sharp contrast. But to be fair, it was quite on balance in terms of some of the discussion about the design merits of the additions, bearing in mind the age of the house and the fact it's already been substantially extended. In many ways, the extensions that have been carried out have brought it more into line than it was before. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, I can see both arguments. It becomes quite subjective, but that building more on the original and that style rather than this is quite a striking modern design. So I was quite interested to hear what colleagues were saying, and I wouldn't object to the proposal on that basis because it is striking and quite a good design that will stand the test of time. I think, yeah.
I think that's what I think that's what some members felt last time round. Right. Well, I think there seems to be a consensus growing. I may be wrong, but so I'm happy to put it to the vote unless anybody else wants to say anything. In that case, all those in favour of approving this, of approving this, have you got conditions?
I can suggest some, Chair, subject to the members agreeing or the mover agreeing. There would be standard 3-year time for commencement of the development, carry out in accordance with specified plan numbers. I think we'd need to agree some of the new samples of these new materials, natural stone to match the existing house, and also pick up conditions with it being a Section 73 variation of the earlier consent. We need to pick up conditions that are still relevant from that and carry them forward into this new approval if it's granted here today. And if anything else crops up, rather than thinking on the hoof, if that could be delegated to the head of planning to discuss with yourself if there's anything addition to that.
Right.
Just that, I don't know if you had a technical matter, Jane, you wanted to respond to all that.
Yeah, could I just ask that permitted development rights aren't limited in relation to solar panels? Because I think the client might wish to add solar panels to the building at some point in the future. It wouldn't be harmful to the character, and normally that would be permitted development if it wasn't limited.
I've not got the original consent in front of me, so that's the existing consent limits that. You're wanting that condition to be varied, because that's not what this current application is for. We'll have to look into that, Chair. Normally, you would carry forward the same conditions, other than what's been specifically been asked to be varied, and only conditions 2 and I think 6 or 7 was the request. I'd have to go back to the original grant and consider that.
Yes, I don't like doing this, but
yeah. It sounds like it's potentially within our gift to do. We just have to look at that a little bit more carefully, and I'll have a discussion with Jane post-meeting.
well, I don't really like doing this, members, but may I suggest that the conditions be agreed by Chairman and Vice Chairman, because we need to get that absolutely clear in our minds. on that basis that we approve it, including some of the conditions that John has outlined, but with the detailed conditions being agreed by Ginny and I, can I put that to the vote? All those in favour of approving? All those against? Those, the abstainer? Okay, that is approved. Right. And we need to get Adele down, and I need to be clear. Oh, statement to be read out by Democratic Services. Statement to be read out by Democratic Services. So we've only one speaker, so we don't have to worry about that. Adele, would you like to join us down here? No, we're down here. That's uphill. It's the auditorium. Right, just to remind members, we had this before us, I think it was in July, or it might even have been in June. It was June, wasn't it? And we did do a site visit. Since when, of course, we have lost a number of members and we've gained a number of members on the committee. At the time, there was, I think, although we indicated that we might permit it, we did that so that Brian could report back with a clear view about what the policy implications were of approving this. But there was just, I think at the time it's fair to say there was some uncertainty amongst members as to what to do with this application. What we actually have now on the agenda is a report which Adele is going to present about the policy implications of this. But by coincidence, we've actually got two other planning applications, which are the next two that follow, which actually cover the same territory. It is about what we do with chalets, what do they call these things? Pods. Pods. And the way in which that relates to the policies that we have and so on and so forth. So you do need to be a little bit mindful as we go through this of being very clear about why you make different decisions and as to how those relate to each other. So let's start with this report. I'm sorry the main report went out late. I hope members had time to read it, but you will certainly have had time to have read Adele's covering report, which is on page 85 of the agenda. And I think we'll start by asking Adele to introduce that. Oh, which way are you doing?
Yeah, would you like me just to...
Okay, we'll get John to remind us of what the application is about, and then we'll get Adele to tell us about the policy implications, and then we'll invite the applicant to come and speak to us. I should mention that the applicant's agent is somebody who's been known to me professionally for a long time, which I declared on the previous occasion, and I forgot to declare at the beginning of the meeting today. Right.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly describe the development before handing over. So the application site is located to the east of Eam Village at the end of Riley Lane in an elevated location on the hillside to the east of Eam there. The application site is in red there, and the rest of the land in ownership is blue, which includes what you don't see here is a substantial area of woodland here called Pretty Wood. There is a public access up the lane, which then peels off before you get to this property, a bridleway and footpath, which leads down to the Eam New Road down towards Grindleford and Froggatt direction. And we'll see, and members saw on the site visit, that the actual red application site area is a little area of like a dell within the surrounding woodland on lower ground than the group of buildings forming the property at Top Riley. Within that group of buildings there is the house, a camping barn and already three holiday cottages. The The proposed layout is for the 8 pods to be sited within that small paddock. Parking on an existing area of hard standing and use for parking at the top of the site there, and the existing planting which has been managed recently would be retained around the boundaries of this small area, but there is wider planting on the surrounding area outside the boundary. This is looking from the parking area of the house into the behind the left shoulder of the photographer here, and the pods would be arranged 4 down that side, 4 down this side. You can see this was taken in winter, but fairly dense cover, and you can just pick up the long distance of the frogget sort of curb edge in the background there at some substantial distance away. And then just more close up at the left-hand edge of the site, the parking area at the top, perfectly adequate for use. And then this is a shot further down the lane where the public rights-of-way peel off before the access road goes up to the very top of to reach the property. The proposed is for the siting of these 8 glamping pods along with a pathway to access them, and also a packaged sewage treatment plant and soakaway to deal with the waste from each of the pods. You can see the layout of the pods there. Adele will talk more about the nature of them, but the pods would be 7 metres by 3 metres by 2.5 metres tall. And you can see here they have a bathroom at the back, double bed, sort of a day bed sofa, and basic kitchen facilities and a small dining space. Elevation wise, very typical. Members will be familiar with these from other applications. The second issue relating to the proposal, alongside the scale and nature of the pods themselves and the impact on policy, is the access to the site. Members will recall from the last meeting, whilst we don't have objections from the Highway Authority, concerns were raised by officers about the increase in traffic, the comings and goings of vehicles in conjunction with the existing holiday business and other property along this lane upon the sort of enjoyment of the public using the right-of-way to access the footpath, the Riley Graves and the bridle way. I know not all members from the debate last time supported that, but nevertheless that was an issue which officers have raised and was the second reason for refusal of the application, despite the fact that this plan shows, indicates rather, where there would be suitable passing places for vehicles to pass each other on the approach to the property. That's the lower section going up past the Riley Graves, and then the more eastern section, that's the western section, I beg your pardon, it's the other way around. So that's the section up from the roadway, quite steep, round the corner where there's passing places, and then the upper section past the Riley Graves and up to the property itself. So I think at that point I'll hand over to my colleague Adele just to talk more about the policy implications of this.
Thanks, John. Thank you, members. Just to note before we start, 2 small errors in the report. The policy reference in paragraph 21 should be to DMR 1C, and the policy reference in paragraph 24 should be to RT3B and DMR 1C. Apologies for that error. Members were minded to approve the application, although it was recommended for refusal. And the first reason for refusal was that the proposal is considered to be unacceptable by virtue of the number, scale and nature of the pods. As such, the proposal is in conflict with Core Strategy Policy RT3 and Development Management Policy DMR1. The report before you considers the implications and risks of such a departure from policy. Firstly, the impact on adopted planning policies. Secondly, the consistency with previous decisions. And thirdly, on the cumulative impact of development. So taking each of those 3 in turn. First of all, policy impact. Core Strategy Policy RT3 states that static caravans, chalets or lodges will not be permitted. The authority has
had this policy through different iterations of the local plan since at least as far back as the 1994 structure plan. And this is because the permanent or semi-permanent presence of such non-traditional structures are usually incompatible with our conservation purpose. Non-traditional structures do change over time, of course, and that's what we're dealing with here. Previously, static caravans, chalets and lodges were the only products available. The core strategy in 2011 acknowledged the changing market and the emergence of so-called glamping forms of accommodation. The core strategy says that small, simple timber structures may be an acceptable exception to the policy RT3. In 2019, we adopted the development management policies, and in here, our policy on camping pods is very clearly set out. It says that camping pods will be determined against core strategy RT3, and therefore, unless the exceptions apply, they should not be permitted. The exceptions are for small, simple wooden pod structures in woodland locations with minimal landscape impact. These rules are in place, and it is imperative to uphold them because there is already considerable pressure for us to permit bigger structures and more of them. This pressure is likely to continue and grow because camping pods are relatively cheap to purchase, easy to install and easy to manage using online platforms. They offer a good return on investment. It's important to note in consideration of this policy that all of the exceptions must apply. The policy does not permit larger, more complex structures so long as there is minimal landscape impact. The proposed pods cannot be considered to be small. Although the policy doesn't define small, a range of much smaller pods does exist on the market. Just a cursory search online and these can be found. For example, with a footprint of 2.8 metres by 4.7, much smaller, 2.4 by 3.6, much smaller. Those permitted at North Lees are illustrated in Appendix 1. Neither can the pods proposed be considered simple. They contain a double bed, room for a single day bed, a mini kitchenette and a shower and double UC cubicle. They would be permanent structures with their own facilities. This form of pod has already been tested at appeal and found to be not simple. If members are minded to approve the application on the grounds that the proposed structures are in fact small and simple, that is, compatible with policy DMR 1C, the risk here is that we then redefine small and simple for future applications. It undermines our intent of protecting the National Park's open, undeveloped areas. Also, importantly, it undermines our intent of protecting characteristic settlements, gardens and important open spaces that are in and on the edge of settlements create this valued character and the setting of our traditional buildings and landscape features. If members are minded to approve the application on the grounds that the proposed structures are not in fact small and simple, so they're not compatible with policy DMR 1C, but that other exceptional circumstances exist, we would need to say what these are, and this risks undermining strategic policy as a whole, and it could compromise decision making on future applications for any non-traditional structure. Turning now to consistency with previous decisions. If members are minded to approve this application, it would be inconsistent with previous decisions concerning similar structures. And again, these are illustrated for you in Appendix 1. In 2018, the application for 4 camping pods in a woodland setting at Haddon Drive in Bakewell was refused and upheld at appeal. The minutes of the meeting state that members felt that the pods were too large. The second reason for refusal was, and I quote, "The development is contrary to policy RT3, which does not permit cabins or structures, and contrary to emerging policy DMR1, because the pods proposed didn't represent small, simple wooden pod structures." In 2019, the application for 4 camping pods at Upper Elkstons was refused. Minutes of the meeting note that members were concerned about the size of the pods. The first reason for refusal was, and I quote, "The permanence, size and design of the pods means that their potential impacts would be comparable to siting chalets or lodges on the land, which policy RT3 states will not be permitted. On now to the cumulative impact of development. As I have said, there is already considerable pressure for us to permit bigger structures and more of them. This pressure is likely to continue and grow. Unless we adhere to our policy and uphold our long-standing restrictive approach to all types of non-traditional permanent structures, we are at real risk of encouraging and permitting more contrary to policy applications. More individual developments consisting of more and bigger structures will be seriously detrimental to the conservation purpose of the National Park. So in conclusion, if the application is approved, this risks redefining small and simple to include the larger, more complex structures that are now on the market. This is inconsistent with previous decision-making, undermines development management policy and risks undermining the long-standing strategic policy. Consumer demand for this form of accommodation is growing, so it is considered crucial that the authority is able to maintain its policy position. In these circumstances, the Planning Committee is respectfully urged to reconsider its view on the current application and uphold the original recommendation of refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I think we're now at speaker stage, aren't we? Karen, are you doing the statements? You have 3 minutes.
This is a statement from Sir Richard Fitzherbert regarding the camping pods at Top Riley. My name is Richard Fitzherbert and I chair our local tourist board, Visit Peak District and Derbyshire. We represent a cohort of over 400 members in our area and we support and promote businesses both large and small in the National Park that are of a tourism nature. In the main, they are small family operations such as the applicant here, and they contribute hugely to the local economy. I first got involved with this project a couple of years ago and I met the applicant on site to view the ground and see his proposals for the project. I was immensely impressed with his vision and energy as well as his passion for the property. After a great deal of correspondence, meetings and deliberation, a planning application was brought to this committee on the 16th of June and having been recommended for officer refusal, the committee were minded to approve the application. Sadly, as you'll see from the notes, the application was deferred for review of policy and the subsequent concerns if the application was passed. The delay has obviously been of great concern, if not great distress to the applicant, as it prolongs the wait, which is already extensive, and increases the cost before the project can start. I have just stood down from the Planning Committee at Derbyshire Dales District Council, and from time to time the committee went against officer recommendations if we had valid planning reasons. I believe that in this case the officers have had enough time to consider all the consequences of an approval such that the scheme will be of overall negligible harm to the landscape concerned and will also provide welcome quality and quirky accommodation in our area. The applicant, after such a long time, needs to know where he stands and be able to invest in his property with confidence. And so I urge you members to overturn the officer's recommendation and to recommend this application for approval. Mr Belivanis will deliver a great asset to our area and we need to support him. On behalf of Visit Peak District and Derbyshire, the Tourism Board, I applaud this application to you. Please vote for approval. Thank you.
And now you're going to be Councillor Peter O'Brien.
This is a statement from Councillor Peter O'Brien, again regarding the camping pods at Top Riley. I write to urge your continued support for the proposal to locate 8 small camping pods at Top Riley in Eam. The provision of these discreet, modest and small-scale camping pods support one of the primary statutory objectives of the National Park, to promote opportunities for public enjoyment whilst respecting the need to conserve and respect its natural beauty. In addition, the proposed development is in a highly sustainable location with access to regular public transport and local village facilities and will provide much needed support to the local economy. The opportunities to provide simple but high quality accommodation for visitors to the park without converting local cottages to holiday accommodation are increasingly rare, and this is one that merits the authority's support. Your officers acknowledged that the siting and location of the pods could hardly be better. A gentle grassy hollow within the curtilage of Top Rowley and almost completely enclosed by mature native trees. The key issue revolves around the size and nature of the proposed camping pods, and they are pods, not tents, not chalets, not lodges. Your policy requires them to be small and basic, but does not define what this term means. Comparison is made with the pods at the authority's own campsite at North Lees, yet these come with electricity, lighting and heating, so hardly basic in the true sense. And pods, just like tents, come in different shapes and sizes while still being basic. Yes, the proposed pods at Top Rowley are slightly bigger than at North Lees, by about 3 feet in length. Why? Because they have a toilet and washing facilities. Most people, particularly women and families with young children, would expect such facilities to be available as a matter of course, and providing them internally avoids the need for the construction of an obtrusive toilet and sanitary block, as well as extensive external lighting for safety purposes, so surely a win-win situation. So, Chair and members, when we talk about small and basic, please let's keep a common sense perspective of scale and proportion. The apparent fear that if this application is approved, our national park will be inundated with similar camping pods is, I suggest, both illogical and irrational. You must, of course, make your own judgment on what you consider to be small and basic, but the principal criterion in making a decision should and always be the location and impact on the landscape, which is where, as I have pointed out earlier, this application cannot be faltered. In conclusion, and whilst I respect your officer's view, I suggest that on this occasion their reservations are misplaced and unjustified. I can honestly say that I have rarely seen such a well thought through proposal as the application before you, and one which I am sure in years to come will be recognised as an exemplar in the provision of sustainable tourism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Belivan. Is it Belivanis?
Belivanis, yeah.
Belivanis.
Good morning.
You've turned your microphone off.
Is that on? Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you firstly for approving this in June, and then obviously I'm very nervous about this. Roger, can you read this? Is it okay if Roger reads it?
If you'd rather Mr. Yarwood dealt with it, by all means.
The committee took a practical approach and adopted this proposal in line with policy. The scheme quite clearly does not breach your planning policies. These are small pods. They will create employment, sustainable tourism. They'll have no effect whatsoever on the landscape. The proposal was commended by one of the committee members as being a perfect site when they had the site visit. The sole issue here turns on what is meant by the word small. Your officers have provided pod layouts at North Lees, and this shows that the difference in size is very small. Our proposals are hardly any bigger than in comparison, a matter of a couple of feet. Caravans are allowed by your policies, yet caravans are much bigger, higher, more obtrusive than the proposed camping pods. The site was described by planners on site and recognised by the committee on their visit as perfect and well within the Peak Park Planning Authority's policies. It will encourage people to visit and stay and spend money in the park. The issue, as I say, turns on this issue of small, and these are by any standards small. It's not good the officers saying that they have some view of their own about what is small. Small is a comparative issue. These, in the range of pods that are available, is small. The fact that an inspector found in favour of your decision previously shouldn't deter you. Inspectors make bad decisions, as well as officers and as well as members sometimes. But these are small pods, they're in line with your policy, and I urge the committee to stand by its previous decision. Thank you.
Can I just say I don't think you've helped your case by telling us that members make bad decisions.
Yes, for very good reasons.
Thank you very much. Right, members, this is actually quite a difficult one, and we need to think this one through very, very carefully. Just to pull it together a bit, when we had the before us before, there were two issues. One of them was about the camping pods, which I shall come back to, and the other one was about the impact of traffic on the road. And I think we need to keep those two discussions well separated from each other because they are very different things. And I'm going to concentrate to begin with, if members would be cooperative in this, on the pods and the lodges and things like that. The first thing I would suggest to members is that it is a completely academic argument to start arguing about whether a pod is a lodge or not a lodge. I don't know what a lodge is, but it's clearly a small temporary piece of accommodation, a small piece of not substantially built in this context accommodation, which is going to be used for holiday accommodation. And I think it would be wasting our time to spend a lot of time worrying about whether a pod is covered by the policy in RT3B. But it is going to be worth our while thinking a little bit further about what we mean by pod size, the chalet size and so on and so forth. We have in front of us an application where we're actually being told that these pods without this extra length would be acceptable. So forget the traffic, but putting 8 pods on the site, we are told would be acceptable. And if members recall last time that some of the debate was about whether people had to walk up the field to the loo or whether they would have a loo attached to the pod, if you remember that part of the discussion. So the idea of some pods being on this site, traffic willing, was not the issue. The issue was purely about the size. It wasn't about the numbers, purely about the size. So the first question I'd like to get absolutely clear and agreed from officers, Mr. Velivanis in his letter, and I think it's been said again this morning, is making the point that these are only 3 feet or so longer than the same sort of thing that we put in our own campsites. Now, do we agree with that as a factual question? Do we agree that, as a matter of fact, that is the issue of difference? It's only about 3 feet.
The issue with regards to the example was to say that we don't define size, but there are a range of other products. So I've cited both products that are available on the market online, products that are in existence at North Lees. So the point about the size is not to talk about which is precisely bigger than the other. The point is to say that there is a range, and if you admit that there is a range and there are versions of pods that are much smaller than these, then you cannot then say that they are small if there is a range. So that was the point, not to get into a discussion about which is 2 or 3 feet bigger.
But that is the discussion, isn't it? I mean, what we're being told, what we are effectively being told is that because these are that number of feet, and I'm not sure whether we've agreed on what that figure is yet, because we're being told because they are that number of feet longer, they suddenly become from being acceptable to unacceptable. That is the argument that's being put to us. So what I'm not entirely clear is whether that 3 feet is an accurate figure or it's not an accurate figure.
Yeah, I would say it's probably an accurate figure, but it's not just about size, it's size and nature is the thing that we have to consider. It's not just size.
So help us again. Nature in what sense? In its appearance or in some other way?
Whether it's simple or whether it's complex in terms of its internal makeup, the facilities that it has, that kind of thing.
I'll be with you shortly. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you've got a slug that big or a slug that big when you're talking about these things. Okay. Right, members, I know there are 1 or 2 hands being put up. Let's start with Ken Richardson, and I think I saw Andrew Hart. Were there other hands up before I start? Oh, gosh. Well, we'll just go round. Well, Ken, I'll call your name first, and then I'll call others.
Yeah, I own a static caravan, and on that site, and the site next to it, are glamping pods. And if you look at the ones on our site, they're technically, in effect, a wooden tent. So by definition, a temporary building. These appear to have facilities and plumbed in, make them permanent. It's not just saying 3 foot's note, but once they're plumbed into the system, drains, shower, whatever, toilet, the permanent buildings.
Okay, let's get that one right. I've next got Andrew Hart.
Yeah, the ones on our site, are they plumbed in, and do they have facilities?
Are they electrically?
They've got electrical sockets.
They've got electric. They're electrically.
They don't have a separate kitchen.
Do they have a kitchen? Do they have toilets?
No. Do they have a water supply?
No. There's a separate toilet block on the side.
Okay, right. That's it. Okay, Kath Potter, I've got next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm just going to deviate because I'm very, very concerned as to whether the Education Committee has been consulted over whether the lane is suitable with all these vehicles for school children to be taken to the Riley graves. I think it's very important to know. Thank you.
We'll come back to traffic later on, if we can. I've then got Ken Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My point is pretty much the same as that made by Ken Richardson. It's not so much my feeling is that small and simple, as defined as used in the policy, is more to do with the nature, the content of the structure. And as Ken has made the point, these are self-contained units. They are plumbed in, they're fixed to the ground, they are dwellings, effectively. And that doesn't, in my opinion, conform with the small and simple definition, nor the intent of the policy, which is to provide something which is, as Ken said, effectively the equivalent of a wooden tent. That is where we're coming from in terms of fulfilling our statutory purposes to conserve and enhance the landscape, to enable people to enjoy it, but to manage change in the landscape. And I think it's important that the issues that have been raised by officers against policy are significantly taken into account.
Okay. Mike Chaplin.
I was going to make a point about the way technology has really come on in this field in the last 20 or so years against when we originally had our policy drawn up. And I'm conscious that we've just approved the permanent structure where in the previous application where the technology has come on so much that an architect can come up with schemes for extensions which are very modern, and we have the dilemma about whether that fits in with the older building that they're being attached to. And I can see that we are on the horns of a dilemma here, and we've either got to go back and look at our policy and see whether we need to bring it on to account for modern technology, or whether we stick to our guns and say beyond this you cannot go, because the needs and our concerns for the landscape come first.
I'll come back to that. Bill and then Lee.
Yeah, just to that's on, isn't it? Yeah.
Try and get your microphone down a bit nearer your mouth. That's better. Yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Ken said basically, and also I've listened very carefully to and read what the officers have said, and they've gone into it in some detail, so I support them in their views. I don't think I know North Lees very well. It's in the parish where I live. I don't think that's a good comparison at all to make with this proposal. It's something quite different. I also got some very big comments to make on the access and the but we're going to do that in a little while. So I think it's about location. Yeah. So on So yeah.
Lee.
Yeah, I mean the location seems to fit quite well in some respects with regard to the hedging around it, and I'm just questioning the policies. What Ken raised is like we're now in 2023. And does that need revising, that policy? Because I think we're looking, are we saying to people who want to visit Peak District, no, you can't have a toilet and a shower in your facility? And I think things have moved on, and I think we ought to be considering that as the Peak Park Authority ought to move on.
Okay, Andrew, Lydia, then I want to say something myself. Yes.
Yeah, I must declare a sort of interest here. It's only personal. I sit on Enjoy Staffordshire as this park's representative. I've sat on it previously as Staffordshire Moorlands representative as well. So, having done that for more than a dozen years, one of the problems is that we have in the park is we have a lot of day visitors. And those number of day visitors have increased tremendously. And one of the secrets of trying to progress tourism is to actually try and make people stay overnight and not come as a day visitor and clog up the roads and all the rest of it. To enjoy the countryside and to give them the sort of facilities that in many parts of the country they can't get. And I agree with my colleague. It's a valid point. Are we going to say to people, right, okay, as far as the Peak Park's concerned, you can't have a toilet and you can't have a shower. Because that's going to turn off a lot of people and they'll just come into the park on a day basis. And we're struggling as it is. A few years ago, we had what's well over £9 million budget. What is it now? 6.7 million to try and look after and cater for more people coming in. And we're struggling. We're really struggling badly. So it's a small measure, but to provide facilities that are going to make people stay for longer rather than trooping in and out of the park in a car is very attractive to me. And I just want that to be noted, please.
After me. Thank you. Andrew, there was another one. It's Lydia, sorry.
Yeah, just two things. One on the small, I think if we're saying there's smaller products on the market and even smaller products come out, then does that mean the small products are then medium size? So I think policy needs to be tightened up there if we're going to define on size. Yeah. Then in terms of simplicity, I think if I was looking for simple accommodation, I would expect a toilet and a shower. So again, it needs to be very clearly defined. I'm just back from Uganda, where doing a lot on hygiene and sanitation. For women and for families, it's very important to have facilities close by. And then are we then excluding people from being able to visit in this kind of an environment in affordable accommodation because they don't have a toilet and a shower very close? So I think it's a real tricky debate, but it's not something that puts me off simple accommodation having a toilet and a shower in a pod.
Thank you. I think we need to. I think there are a number of factors that sort of float around in my mind. One of them is that we, despite this very emphatic policy which says no chalets and lodges, we have actually approved wooden chalets in a caravan site down the Ashbourne Road. And the reason for that was that we were replacing something that was there before. But more importantly, the main reason was that they were totally invisible from the wider landscape because they were in a quarry. Landscape considerations enabled us to approve those chalets in that location. We have another application later on our agenda for a very similar site where we're actually being asked to approve chalets and static caravans on an existing caravan site. The argument in that report being you can't see them in the wider landscape. So the question that must be asked is, why do we have this policy in the first place? The policy is fundamentally about landscape. It is about ensuring that alien-looking buildings do not occur in this landscape. That must be what the reason for the policy is. It's not very clear in our policy documents. That must be the reason for the policy. If you apply the question of impact on landscape to this particular site and think about where what is being proposed can be seen from, then you reach whatever conclusions it is that you wish to reach, knowing the site. And then it comes down to a simple question. Are they allowed lavatories or are they not? And I'm really having some difficulty in reconciling the different situations that we're getting in here. I would agree with Mike, when we come on to the local plan review, I'm not saying we have to turn the policy upside down. I think we have to explain it better and we have to get it much more clear. But we need also to understand, and I'm taking Lydia's point as well, we need to understand that we were told on the Ashbourne Heights Garden application site yesterday that since COVID, the demand for these chalets and static caravans and things has rocketed. The market is changing. There are other considerations. One of these days, Kath will bend our ears again about the number of Airbnbs that are appearing in Tideswell and Bakewell. The need for a residential accommodation for our tourists is there. And for me, the dilemma is that there's a clear need for a slight change of direction in the way we're going towards these things, but we have a clear policy which pulls us in the opposite direction, and we've got to try and reconcile those things as we go through it. I'm going to invite you to comment on that. We're going to have to reconcile those things as we look at these various applications and be quite sure about what we're doing. Brian.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm not going to repeat a lot of that, but I think there's a couple of strategic points that kind of underpin the rationale for the policy, and one is demand. You know, the idea that this was a new area of tourism accommodation that is growing was with us in 2011. You know, we were starting to anticipate that. What we're talking about here is trying to understand where the very limited exceptions are that don't undermine that principle, because strategic policies are important because they stand for 20, 30, 40 years. It's not just this decision. We have to think about what the cumulative impact of many decisions are at scale over long time periods. It's been the same issue with our housing policy. You take a very controlled, careful, limited approach over time using our policies to understand this. So the strategic principle is important in that respect. And it does come back to the idea of demand and growth. Yes, there's a demand. Yes, there's a demand for market housing. Yes, there's a demand for other business sheds. Yes, there's a demand for all sorts of things in this national park. We've got to take some quite strong principles to control and manage that over time. I would be concerned as well about a slow, steady move to suddenly say something that was acceptable at 2-3 metres is now acceptable at 6, because it's that subtle change into saying what was just a camping tent, a wooden tent, is now a chalet. And we've accepted that that principle was important before. We're now suddenly saying that 8 chalets could be acceptable. That is a change to the policy principle. And I think we have to be very aware of that in any decisions here. I think absolutely right to record and look at these debates coming into the local plan review, because things are changing. We have to reflect on how much we can accommodate, what the capacity of the park is, and where the best limitations for that are. But I think there's a big step, you know, in some of these applications to get to that point through a case.
Okay, now I've got Ken and I've got Bill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address the issues that some fellow members have made about are we looking to limit or prevent people from having a shower or use a toilet. And I think it's a very simplistic, with all due respect, it's a very simplistic statement because we're not doing that. What we're looking at is a range of provision that occurs across the national park, it seems to me. We have hotels, we have pubs, we have building lets, bread and breakfast, Airbnb, and we have camping barns, which are even more basic. I think what we've got to recognise is that what we're looking at and what we're trying to achieve through policy, it seems to me, is provision of a range of opportunities of choice. Because some people will choose to go in a camping barn. Others won't go anywhere other than a self-contained unit in a five-star hotel. It's down to choice. And what we're looking to provide through this policy, and I refer back to the small and simple, and while it gives us issues over definition, I think it's a deliberate case why there isn't a definition of small and simple. Because it's not about size, though some might be surprised to hear that. It's about the nature of the content and what that provision is. And I go back to the point I made earlier, that what we're looking at is the difference between a non-permanent structure that could, if needs, be moved around, for which there is a toilet block and washing facilities provided for those people who choose to use that kind of accommodation, against the provision of permanent dwellings. And I think that is the difference that we are being faced with. I don't think permanent dwellings, albeit occupied from by different people at different points in the year, is an appropriate facility to offer in this location. I think the location is fine for small and simple structures with a non-permanent fixed provision, but I don't think that what is being sought is appropriate in terms of our policies and the range of offers for accommodation that occur across the national park.
Okay. I've got Bill and then Ginny, and then I'm going to try and get this wound up. I think we're getting on.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I think Ken summed it up better than I could have. I think I agree with what he said. I think I get the feeling we're not against the sort of provision which is being talked about, and showers and fixed plumbing and all that sort of thing. It's just the right thing in the right location. That's really important for the Peak Park, and I think that's what this meeting, this committee is about. You know, getting the right thing in the right place. That's the critical issue, and you know, yeah.
Okay, Ginny. And then I'm going to ask somebody to move something.
Very quickly, Ken and Bill have just said exactly what I was going to say, so I just echo those thoughts.
Yes. Right. Is somebody...
You mentioned you were going to talk about the traffic issues.
well, Kath mentioned the traffic issues already, and I'm taking it from what Bill has said, that he's got views on the traffic issues. Can I just remind members what the recommendation is, and then I want to know whether somebody wants to move it or not. The recommendation is that it be refused because it's contrary to policy RT3, and, as we've just been discussing, and also because of the impact on the environment of the right-of-way that went there, which is what Kath's point was. So that is the recommendation that was sent out to you on Wednesday evening, I think it was. Do I have a motion of some sort? Ken, you're moving those two, and you're seconding those. Are there any amendments to that? In that case, all those in favour of refusing it on the grounds set out in that report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 2, and I'm abstaining. So that is carried. Oh, 3, and I'm sorry. What was yours? Your abstention. 2 abstentions. Right. Move on now to the Birchover application, Rockingstone Farm, Router Lane, Birchover, which is a... Oh, right, yes, we're moving into Mark. And it says we've got some speakers on this, but I don't see... Ah, here they are. Okay. Right. Right, Mark, would you like to introduce this Rockingstone Farm application for us, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon as it is now, members. This application seeks retrospective planning permission for the retention of timber cabin structures and platforms for use as holiday accommodation on land to the west of Rockingstone Farm. As you can see on the plan on the screen here, Rockingstone Farm, it consists of, if I can get my cursor to move, it consists of the main farmhouse and traditional outbuildings which are located here, the latter of which have been converted to holiday accommodation, and it's located in open countryside to the west of Birchover village. The cabin and associated structures subject to the application are sited on a small wooded hill known as Bradley Rocks, around 100 metres to the west of Rockingstone Farm. And the application site is outlined in red here, and the access to the site you'll see more clearly on the slides to come. But the single red line you can see annotated here is the access footpath to the site, with a parking area provided here. So if I go through some photographs first, as you can see, as I mentioned rather already, there are a number of structures. This one being the toilet building associated with the accommodation. This one being an outdoor bath or hot tub. And this is the cabin itself where the accommodation is provided. And there you can make out a shower built onto the rocks in the centre of the screen. And this is another view of the cabin. As you can see, it has a flue through the roof to serve a heater inside. And another view towards the end of the cabin as well. This is a raised platform with roof that's been constructed to provide a seating and outdoor cooking area. And this is showing views out from the site. You can see it's elevated, and as you can see in the previous photos, built into the rocks within a wooded setting. And this is a view of the path from the access serving the property. This is the beginning of the path that winds its way up to the accommodation. And this is the parking area that's provided for those visiting the accommodation. The access that you saw in the previous photo is taken off roughly up here, and the path then climbs up the hillside. So we have plans here of the chalet, of the cabin itself, which you can see is just under 2 metres square. So these are the different elevations of that. A large window to one side to take in the views, and the toilet cubicle, which is smaller as you'd expect, just under 1.3 metres wide, and the same deep as well. And this is a section through, so you can see how the building is positioned against the hillside. And this shows the position of each element relative to each other. So you have the cabin building itself here, you have the seating area here, the toilet is here, and the hot tub is over here. And you can see the dotted line coming in to show the footpath there, which print's a bit small on there, but this is slightly wider scale, showing the parking area on the track here, and this is where I mentioned the path winding up. As members who visited yesterday found it's quite a walk up to there. So if I just go back and I'll leave you with a photograph of the building. As explained during the previous item, Core Strategy Policy RT3B states that static caravans, chalets or lodges won't be permitted because this is typically incompatible with the conservation purposes of the National Park with the potential impact on valued landscape characteristics. Policy RT2 also states, amongst other things, that new build holiday accommodation will not be permitted. The cabin and the associated structures are sited on various levels on the hillside, and the presence of the large bollards in this locality means that in some cases you saw they're actually built into the landscape itself. Whilst neither the hut or the associated structures are considered reflective of the local building traditions, they do follow a design typical of cabin type structures, and so the design itself of the building is not something with which officers have taken issue. Views towards the hillside can be seen at distance from Winster Road. However, because of the siting within the established planting and against the rocks, those views are limited, and it's hard to detect the buildings in most of those views. However, they do nevertheless represent alien structures added into the landscape in this location and provide clutter to the hillside in an otherwise undeveloped landscape. If the development was acceptable in principle, then the minor landscape impacts arising might have been able to be viewed more favourably. However, the limited landscape prominence of the development does mean that the impacts would be relatively localised, but in the absence of a justification in policy terms, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers. I hope we've got them in the right order. I've got Mr. Luke Osborne first, is that right? If you'd like to take the seat in front of you, there's a little red mark on the thing in front of you. If you press that, that's right. And
okay.
Has the light come on? Yes, it has. You have 3 minutes in which to address us.
I was really saddened to hear about the situation with the cabin. It's quite an important source of customers for my business. My business is a company called Sourced Here. We work with about 40 Peak District farmers, food and drink producers, and you can shop from us, and it's a bit like getting a Sainsbury's delivery or an Ocado delivery. We take local food and drink to the guests staying at Boulderfield Cabin. We do that on quite a frequent basis, and they seem to really appreciate what we provide them. And in turn, instead of those guests going to a national supermarket chain, they come to us, and the local economy benefits. The first time I went to the cabin, I struggled to find it. It's really hard to see. You know, I had to be supported to get there. And you know, you cannot drive a vehicle there. You have to walk up. So I now have very strong muscles as a result. I think also there's a couple of pubs in Birchover. They're probably in a similar situation to me. We'd be very sad to lose those customers.
Thank you very much. And the second speaker I have is Linda Neal. Is that you? Yes, would you like to join us? Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please,
Yeah.
whenever you're ready.
I'm Linda Neal, and I'm a near neighbour of Rockingstone Farm. I live across the field, so I can actually see Bradley Rocks and the woods where I live. The first time I saw Boulderfield Cottage, I was absolutely amazed by it. It's very secretive. It's hidden away in the trees. From where I live, you cannot see it at all. I admit from the Winster Road, when there's no foliage on the trees, you can probably just catch a glimpse. But I think if you don't know it's there, then you can't really see it. It's a quite a unique little holiday let, and I know people I've met who've been staying there have really enjoyed the landscape and being in such a secretive place. And it's in a, you know, it's something very unusual. I can't think that there's many other places like this where people could go. And like Luke's just said, the people can park near the cabin. They don't need to take the cars into the village. They can walk up, use the local facilities, and they've supported the pubs. A very important thing after really lockdown, when they had a very difficult time. And I know a lot of businesses, you know, did fold. I think another important thing is that it hasn't taken any of the local housing away. In a village like ours, there's a lot of second homes and holiday cottages. It's you know, it's not taken away from the local housing supply. So you walk around the village sometimes, as I did on Saturday, there was a couple of cottages, overgrown gardens, didn't look as though anybody had been near them for weeks, you know, so they just stood empty. I say it's got its own car parking space, so there's no need for anybody to take the car up into the village, which gets very congested over weekends with visitors from all over the place. So it doesn't add to the congestion up there at the weekends. There's been quite a lot of support from local neighbours and villagers. I've not heard anybody make any complaints about what's been built up there. In fact, I think some people don't even know it's there. You know, I know it's there because I've already visited there. And I think finally, you know, the family have lived at Rockingstone Farm for a very long time. They've been fully involved in activities within the village, and you know, they like to support local events like open gardens and village concerts, and the children have actually supported the pubs and campsites by working there during the school holidays. So I would be very sad to see it go. I know it's brought a lot of pleasure to a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's very good of you. And I've got Chiara O'Rourke. Oh.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm reading my mother's statement as she has COVID today. I've lived at Rockingstone Farm since I was 2 years old, and I've worked at a local pub while I wasn't at Lady Manners School during the holidays, so I understand kind of the community and everyone's opinions. My family has been in Derbyshire for at least 6 generations, and I had the good fortune to grow up at Rockingstone Farm, where, as a single parent, my mother did bed and breakfast to pay the bills. I became an engineer and moved to Hong Kong, where I met my husband, Jerry, and had 2 children. 10 years later, we had the opportunity to move back to England, and more specifically, Rockingstone Farm, and we jumped at the chance to be able to raise our children in such a magical place. We've always called the hill behind the house the Rocks, and it's always been a great place for us. Somewhere as a child and now with my own family, we spent time playing games amongst the boulders, having barbecues and sleeping out under the stars. We spent years discussing the possibility of creating a small space that would allow us to enjoy the unique qualities all year round without harming the landscape. We then collaborated with local celebrated craftsman Chris Fleming to come up with a bespoke design. The cabin was designed to be the size of a garden shed to have no negative impact on the surroundings, without foundations, and to be easily dismantled, leaving no trace. It was built using recycled materials, and everything was carried up by hand, and the idea was to allow you to feel like you are in the landscape. As we heard on the news, COVID really affected people's mental health, and people were looking for retreats to go get back to nature and reset. And this was a great opportunity to share this special place and generate income, as Jerry had been laid off from his job during this pandemic. We endeavoured to create a one-of-a-kind eco-retreat, and we worked very hard to make it sustainable and eco-friendly, and we have had overwhelmingly positive feedback from our guests. We planted 50 trees and installed an electric charger just this year, and the cabin's been featured in the Times travel section twice, the Evening Standard for Coolest Day of the Week, and Good Housekeeping magazine, which is all very positive press and reviews. One of our reviews left by a guest who checked out 4 days ago is on our public Airbnb page as a good representation of our normal reviews. We've had such an amazing time at Boldfield Cabin. It's exceeded our expectations and it's absolutely beautiful, and we didn't want to come home. We wanted a holiday where we could reconnect with nature, and that's exactly what this offers. The hot tub was amazing, with the most beautiful view and falling asleep under the stars and waking up to a view of the trees. The most amazing accommodation we have ever stayed in. Thank you so much, Rachel and Jerry, for creating such a perfect getaway spot, for being the most amazing host. We'll definitely be back. This little cabin does not harm the surroundings, and it provides guests with a unique opportunity to enjoy the Peak Park in the most sustainable way.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we had a very interesting site visit yesterday, probably one of the most adventurous we've had for a long time. And I think it was very much worthwhile doing the visit. Does anybody who was on that trip want to make a comment about it? No? Okay, we've got two now. I've got Ginny and Bill.
Thank you. I'd just make the observation that this is actually a good example of what's pure and simple. It's very simple accommodation and quite small accommodation as well. I couldn't see how it could be overlooked, and I wouldn't have a problem with approving this.
Okay, Bill?
I think this location is in a very... Thank you. The location's in a very special place, in a small scale, in a very special place, Birchover and surroundings, and obviously in a very special place, a national park. And I think one of the purposes of the national park is to protect those places. Although it's private land at the moment, there are many areas in the national park that are private land where it wouldn't be acceptable to have development, however well hidden or sensitive it was, because that would be intruding and affecting the landscape. I'm sure we could all think of many places where that would be nice. We put a cabin there, you can't see it, that's fine. So the purposes we've got to think about is protecting the landscape. There's quite... I have been past that area before and used the network of public footpaths, so I'm aware of what a special place it is. So I was quite interested to sort of come on the site visit yesterday. I think if you therefore allowed retrospectively this application, it would be the green light for numerous sites, countless sites, perhaps hundreds of sites within the Peak Park, to people who think, well, that's nice, we'll put a cabin or a lodge or whatever in this very secluded location. And I also thinking about if this application had come to us before it was built, what our reaction would have been. You know, I think looking at it that way, because the fact it's being built is a bit irrelevant, really. It's the principle of the whole issue. And I think we ought to think about what would happen if the application came to us. I disagree about... I also think we ought to think it's actually quite dangerous, the access to it. It's unlit, and, you know, perhaps we've got a small duty of care somewhere along the way to think about how people could access it and any future sort of possible dangers there are to pedestrian access to that, but that's a small matter, I suppose. It may be in the future, we don't know, legislation. We've got the Countryside and Rights of Way Act in 2000 and changed in ownership, where that area might become more accessible in the future. And I think, you know, thinking of preserving the landscape, we've all got to bear that in mind, that landscape is potentially altered to, you know, and affected and you know, you could argue degraded in that way, because it's a rocky, forested landscape just on that place. I also feel quite strongly that although, yeah, there's no parking at the site, but there is parking along that lane, and I have used that area there. It's just another car intruding on the landscape, which is actually without cars. So you've just got a car parked there quite a lot of the time. We don't need more cars parked in sensitive areas in the Peak Park. And I think myself, and I'm speaking for colleagues here, we're not against local services, local sourcing materials, holiday accommodation. It's just, as I think was a previous item, it's got to be the right thing in the right place. And I'm very concerned about the precedent this sort of thing would cause. And as I say, there are hundreds of sites in the Peak District that could copy this. Thank you.
Yes, can I just draw out two things out of this? In the report, it tells us on page 100 that exceptionally the development of structures may be permitted where these are small, simple wooden, and they say pod structures. Well, if we can interpret a pod as a chalet, we can interpret a chalet as a pod. Pod structures in woodland locations with minimal landscape impact. I'd like an officer comment on how that might relate to this application. And could I be clear about this point that Bill makes about where people park?
Yep. In terms of the comparison to a small, simple, sorry, my microphone notice, small, simple pod, the size of the cabin itself, and I don't want to just get back into a conversation about size particularly, but that is small and simple. It doesn't have the facilities within it. However, to facilitate it being there, it then has to have additional structures scattered around that hillside. So you've then got the hot tub, the seating area, and the toilet block as well. So I don't think it's commensurate with a description as a timber pod. Okay. In terms of Bill's query about the parking, the applicant has advised that that's where it's set out on the planning application form as the parking space. However, they have said that parking is also available at their own property as well. So that particular impact could be addressed if members were minded to approve.
Okay. Now somebody put their hand up. That was Ken.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because Bill has said all the things that I was going to say. I would just reiterate that I was coming from exactly the same position, that if this had come to us as a planning application with nothing on the ground, magical though it might be, I would imagine that the recommendation would be for refusal, and I think committee would have gone that way. And that is presuming, I know, but I think we have to rise above the issues of existence.
Okay, Kath?
I totally concur with both Bill and our chair of the authority's comments. I'm not happy with retrospective applications either, but to me it's a question of safety issues. And sadly, quite some years ago, a child was killed at Rota Rocks, who fell actually, and was in a party. And so it is dangerous. I really am concerned. I think it's a super thought, but whether it's acceptable there to me, I would not see it. And I think, as you said, Bill, there could be a proliferation of these sorts of applications if this were to get through. I'm sorry, because I like to support everything local if I can.
Okay. And anyone else wish to speak? I don't have a motion in front of me at the moment. Move. Is that seconded? Yes, seconded. Any amendments to that motion? All those in favour of refusing on the ground set out in the report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? And those abstaining? Are you against? You two against, and those abstaining? So there are 2 abstentions, 2 against, and the rest are for. Right. So we don't interrupt it later on. We're clearly going to go beyond 1 o'clock. So can I have the usual motion to go beyond 1 o'clock, please? All those in favour? I think, okay, we'll give it 5 minutes, and then we'll start at 5 to 1. Okay? By all means. Mr. Walmsley with us? Okay, good. Thank you very much. So, Mark, would you introduce the next report, which is the caravan site at Ashbourne Road, Fenny Bentley?
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of an area of land within an existing holiday park from touring and camping plots for the stationing of static caravans and holiday lodges. This, as you can see on the screen here, is the holiday park in question. It's called Ashbourne Heights, and it's located off the A515 close to Fenny Bentley. So there's quite a lot of lines on the plan here, so I'll just try and explain what's what. So the 515 is running down the side of the screen here. The access comes off here and rises up for turning west and coming into the site here. And the other main line that you can see sweeping through the site along here is the Tissington Trail. So the site access actually crosses over the trail as you come into the site. And as you'd expect, the red rectangles you can see within the site here are representative of a number of the currently stationed static caravans and lodges within the site. You'll see on subsequent slides that actually there's the sighting of them within these spaces within as well. This area down the eastern edge of the site, which I'm trying to outline here, currently has a lawful use for the summer season only for touring and touring caravans and tents. And the area, which is the application site area here, has a lawful use for the siting of up to approximately 40 tents and caravans for 10.5 months of the year. There's also a range of facilities buildings on the site as well, and those are the red buildings that you can see roughly where my cursor is around there. So this aerial view is helpful, I think, in terms of understanding what's where rather than the line plan. And it shows roughly the layout of the static vans and the lodges, which are up at this part of the park here. And you can see at the time this image was taken that it looks like there's a number of touring tents and potentially caravans there, and indeed within the application site area as well. I won't dwell on this plan because it's really saying the same thing again and is quite difficult to interpret. And so this is the proposed site at a closer view. So you can see this is the layout of static vans and lodges that's proposed within the application site area. So the access already serving the site, of course, would also continue to serve this part of the development. And there would be 16 lodges and 16 static caravan pitches and 4 lodges. And those would replace, as I say, up to 40 touring caravan and camping pitches. Moving on to some photographs of the site. So this is a photo within the field looking roughly east. You can see at the moment there's actually a large power or telegraph line within the field. That would actually be undergrounded as part of the current application, so that would be removed from the landscape and from the site. And the back of the site, the back of the application site, I should try and clarify that and distinguish between that and the park. You can see just the roofs of the lodges within the park beyond this touring field. And this photo is looking more sort of southeast, I suppose, so you've still got those same lodges running along this side, and then you can see the static vans in the wider site beyond the edge of the field there. This is looking north directly out of the only gate in this field, so you can see beyond here, this is the edge of the site, and you're into open landscape beyond that. This is looking that same way, so that gate is here. The last photo was taken from. And you can see that the site is very well enclosed within the wider landscape. So you've got a tall, mature hedgerow here, a conifer hedgerow with substantial mature planting beyond that as well. And down the western edge of the field here, sorry, I'll come back to that in a moment. Actually, there's a slide that shows that better. And then if you look in the opposite direction, back towards, you've got the static vans here, and this is the facilities buildings that I mentioned before. And that's looking directly north from the access into the field, so that the remainder of the site is south of this. And this is the belt of woodland, which is along the western edge of the site. There's quite a lot of ash in here, and a woodland management plan is proposed to be secured. if permission was to be granted. So that would be replaced and supplemented as appropriate. And there's the proposed layout in more detail at a larger scale. So in addition to the units going into that field, there's a significant amount of landscaping proposed as well. All of the circles that you can see are tree planting and shrub planting through the site. And I don't know if you can pick up the dotted areas to the sides and to the central area, which is to be wild grass and wildflower planting as well. And those are just some indicative examples of the appearance of the type of structures that would be introduced into that field. Although it's, as you'll have seen in the report, it's recommended that the final details of appearance and colour are reserved by condition. So just moving on to the merits of the application. As noted on the last two items, there is a policy presumption against supporting the development comprising static caravans. The proposal is therefore in conflict with these policies unless it can be demonstrated there's exceptional reasons for an approval. As with the previous application, the site is well screened, but unlike the other holiday accommodation proposals that you've considered today, this is a well-established holiday site already, with a large number of static vans and lodges already existing on it. It's also noted that this site is already in use as part of the holiday site, albeit for other purposes, and somewhat more transient, up to 10.5 months a year. So the number of units on here is reduced overall, but it's accepted that these units, of course, would typically be larger than you'd expect a tent or a touring caravan to be. Significantly, there'd be a marked improvement to the landscaping and the ecological value of the site by virtue of the proposed planting scheme and the woodland management scheme. These would serve to improve biodiversity at the site, as well as to ensure the continued long-term screening of this side of the holiday park, both the development that's proposed and indeed the development beyond that within the site to the south. Taking those various issues into account, it's concluded that the proposal would represent a modest extension of the primary land use at the site without expanding its overall area or landscape impact, and would provide notable ecological improvements. On balance, our view is that these material factors are sufficient to outweigh the policy presumption regarding the provision of static vans in this instance, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have the one speaker, Mr. Walmsley. If you'd like to come forward, please. Thank you. And you have 3 minutes in which to address us.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, this application, put simply, involves the use of a field that already has permission for use as a touring caravan and camping pitches within an existing and established holiday park for the stationing of static holiday caravans and lodges. In land use planning terms, therefore, this is simply an application for a different form of accommodation to that already permitted. The reason the applicants wish to provide this form of accommodation is to meet the demand for more sophisticated holiday accommodation arising from the staycation trend in the UK. The COVID pandemic and Brexit, together with wider economic impacts on household budgets, have driven an increase in the demand for UK-based holidays. One of the most significant constraints to meeting this demand is the provision of such accommodation that is not weather dependent. The provision of that type of accommodation enables UK-based holiday providers, such as the owners of this holiday park, to extend the holiday season, which provides additional benefits to the local economy. Park Holidays, the applicants, acquired Ashbourne Heights about 3 years ago, and since then have invested over £500,000 in infrastructure and environmental improvements at the park. The application, if permitted, will enable the provision of better quality accommodation at this established holiday park. The planning policy considerations are set out in the officer's report, but I would like to highlight one aspect that may not have come across as clearly as it might from that report. The general preclusion to the provision of static caravan and lodge accommodation within the national park is subject to a specific caveat in the core strategy. This states, and I quote, "Exceptionally, static caravans and chalets or lodges may be acceptable in locations where they are not intrusive in the landscape. This caveat is very important in relation to the planning policy basis for this application, as it quite specifically allows permission to be granted, provided the landscape impact is not intrusive. It will be apparent from the site visit that this part of the holiday park that's proposed for the static and lodge pitches is in an extremely well-screened area of the park, and the units proposed will not be visible or intrusive in the wider landscape from outside the holiday park. A wide-ranging landscape and visual impact assessment has been carried out and confirms that the field in question cannot be seen from outside of the holiday park boundaries. Sorry. In addition
very quickly.
Okay. There is an existing public footpath which passes through the site, and this is to be retained and the route protected in the proposed scheme. The applicants are willing to provide additional signage for the footpath within the site if that is considered beneficial.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can stay there if you like. I don't think there's going to be a lot of problems with this application, but let's see. Members.
Sorry, Patrick, I'll just point out where the route of that footpath is that was just mentioned, because I should have done that in the presentation. So it comes through the main site, and then it comes into the application field here before passing this way out of the site. Although it was explained to us on site yesterday that actually more naturally the route is taken a different way before picking back up with the footpath, but this application wouldn't obstruct the line of the footpath.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members. Ken?
I'd perhaps just add that one of the things we learned on site yesterday, and it was on one of Mark's early slides, the intrusive electricity line and poles are proposed to be undergrounded, which will, I think, be a landscape benefit as well. But I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
I mean, it just follows on from the previous two things we discussed. This is the right thing in the right place. And I think that mantra is important to sort of get the idea of, you know, we are offering quite a lot of units, the right thing in the right place. And also just on that footpath thing, I sort of mentioned it on site yesterday. I just think it's if we can define that footpath as a condition, I think it's a win for the owners of the site. It's a win for the occupiers of the units, because they don't have people wandering around. And I speak as someone who uses footpaths a lot. What you don't want to do is enter a site where it's very confusing, there's lots of units, and where do you go? Do you go here, there? Just define it. The present statutory line is very easy. It goes round the bottom, but just define it, and it's a win for obviously the users of the footpaths and other users of the site, so people aren't wandering anywhere. So if that can be included in some way, that would be very helpful. But it's the right thing in the right place.
Are you seconding Ken's motion? Sorry? Are you seconding Ken's motion? Yes, okay. Any other members? Well, can we put something in about footpath signage, and on that basis, all those members in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all but 2. All those against, and those abstaining. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now. Have we got the agent for the Fenny Bentley site with us?
No, they advised us yesterday.
Oh well, aren't you versatile? Yes. Okay. I hadn't picked that up. Right. Mark, would you like to introduce this one, please? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I need to start here with an amendment to the report.
That's always a bad start.
It's not ideal. The slides have been updated based on amended plans that were received since the last committee meeting, as is the assessment section of the report. However, the proposal section was missed at the start. So, paragraph 12 of your report, the last sentence of that should be replaced with a hard standing to the northeast corner, because the building has been reorientated. So, as you look at it now, it's been turned effectively through 90 degrees counterclockwise, which will make, when I come to show you the elevation plans, it will hopefully make a bit more sense. So that's the change to the end of paragraph 12. paragraph 13, because of the changed orientation, it's difficult to amend that paragraph in a way that isn't too complex. So I would suggest you strike out paragraph 13 entirely. And essentially it's replaced with a summary that the principal part of the building is now 4.7 metres to the eaves and 5.9 to the ridge. And the lower section of the building is now 3.1 metres to the eaves and 5 metres to the ridge. And as I say, when we go through the slides, you'll see what those reductions amount to when you look at the building. So a decision on this application was deferred by members of the Planning Committee at the June 2023 meeting. The reason for deferral was to allow a member site visit to be carried out to better appreciate the landscape setting of the development. So the proposal is for a modern portal-framed agricultural building of L-shaped form. It's part of a landholding. This is the landholding at the application site. It forms part of a larger farm, the majority of which is based down about 1.5 miles south of here, near to Ashbourne, and has parcels of land between there and Fenny Bentley. As you look at this plan, incidentally, this is the position of the proposed building. So if I go back, there's an existing access into the field here off the B5056. And for those familiar with the area, if you go a few hundred metres further down this road, you come to the junction with the 515 where the Bentley Brook Inn is. So there's an existing access into the field at this location. It's proposed to install a new track that comes back on itself to an area of hard standing and a proposed agricultural building here. You'll see in the photos and the plans that follow that the land banks fairly steeply from the road, and so this building would be cut into the landscape. The agricultural need that's set out is for the more efficient management of the farm. This land is grazed and also used for taking haylage, and at the moment the applicants have to move that stock winter between here and the application, in the main farm holding back towards Ashbourne, 1.5 miles south, and the same with any haylage as well. So the intention is that the building will be used for the housing of cattle when required, the housing of haylage and the housing of machinery, including a tractor. And there's a more detailed plan of the site itself. Supplementary planting is proposed along the edge of the road, and since the June committee, the applicant has also added a proposed hedgerow along the fence line here. So for those who aren't familiar with the site, there's a gated access on this line, and this line effectively is a post and rail fence that runs back from this point at the edge of the gate back to the road. So there's a small area of hard standing there at the moment. You'd have a cart track style track coming up to the yard here. An enclosed yard for cattle handling in front of the yard. This hard standing here incidentally would be seeded, so it'd be seeded hardcore, so you'd expect that would weather back in, whereas this is a surfaced, presumably concrete hard standing with the building arranged as you see there. So this is a photograph looking towards the access. That's the site access there. At the application, earlier in the application stage, officers had some concerns about an intensification of use of this access, given the junction onto the road. However, the Highway Authority haven't raised any objections to the proposal. They're satisfied that overall the building wouldn't result in an intensification of use of the access. That's a closer view of the access. So this is the fencing that runs back down towards the road on that side. And this is looking towards the site itself. So the building would be positioned roughly back here in this rising land behind this tree. And that's a view back to the road. You can see at this point of time the trees are in leaf, so the road is running along here. Another view of the trees. You can see even when they're in leaf there are substantial gaps between them to allow views into the site. And this is it in the winter when the trees are not in leaf, and you can see it's obviously much more open. So again the road is running along here, and this photo is taken roughly from the corner of the closest corner of the application site. Looking a little bit further along towards the north, and then a closer plan of the roof of the building itself. And these are the elevations as proposed. So existing ground level shown with a dotted red line. It shows the extent of cutting in. So this is the view that as you're approaching south down the B50-56, this is the view of the building that you would see. So say the building has been reoriented since the application came in. In doing so, it's achieved a reduction in the height of this part of the building from finished floor level to the top of roughly a metre. And also by digging it further into the hillside, which they've been able to do by turning it around, there's less build-up of ground at this side as well. So the overall height reduction compared to the scheme in June is, I think, it's about 1.8 metres in total. This is the elevation facing into the bank, so that wouldn't be immediately apparent to anybody passing on the road. And this is the view on approach from the south. And that's the view pretty much as you're immediately in front of the building on the road, as it were, if you were to look straight towards it. And these plans have been provided to show the changes from what members saw in June. So the purple is the previous outline, and obviously the black line is now proposed. And the same for the other sides as well. And that's showing the visibility from the access. As I say, we're not raising any objections in those regards, given the Highway Authority's position. And this is just showing the proposed planting in more detail. So, find my page. Okay. So the reasons that the application was previously recommended for refusal still stand. Our concerns are that this is a large and isolated building in an otherwise undeveloped parcel of land. Those impacts are relatively localised. The main point they will be appreciated from is the B50-56. However, as you pass this section of road, you see no other buildings at all. And despite the proposed additional planting, which we'd expect to be native and therefore deciduous, there's going to be large periods of the year where this building is prominent. By virtue of the landform as well, it will be sat up and prominent, despite the applicant's efforts to cut it further into the landmass that's there. And for those reasons, the application is recommended for refusal, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Now we have a statement from
Joe Harrison.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about going on the stage and playing?
Thanks, Chair. This is a statement from Joe Harrison, the agent for the application at Fenny Bentley. Further to committee meeting of 16th of June, the applicant has taken on board the suggestions made by the committee. Although the size could not be reduced any further, the orientation and design of the buildings has changed. A further justification was presented to the planning officer along with the revised design and landscaping. This change will see the enclosed and highest side of the storage building, that's southeast elevation, now being set against the bank and further dug into the ground than previously proposed to further reduce the height of which the building protrudes from the ground on the northwest elevation. The livestock building has also changed to a monopitch design, again to help reduce the impact on the land. The landscaping scheme has also been revised to include a hedgerow up to the canopy of the trees north of the building where the fence line for the access track meets the road. This way it will not impede on the visibility displays. The applicant would like to briefly remind the committee that the site as it currently is inefficient and has no suitable livestock handling facilities and has been escaped livestock in the road when trying to load them for transport between the sites, causing safety issues for passing vehicles, to the livestock and to the handlers. The applicant is hopeful that with these changes and additional landscaping, the committee will look more favourably on the application. Thank you for your time.
Right, thank you very much, Karen. Okay, members, last time, if you remember, I think quite a lot of members were rather sympathetic to this application, but there were concerns, obviously, about landscaping and I think about traffic at the time. So we did eventually do a site visit, and I think it was quite instructive. Any members who were on that have got any thoughts or comments on it? If you wish to, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to compliment the applicant on listening to the concerns of committee and the amendments that have subsequently been made to the plans, the reorientation, I can understand the agricultural, economic need for the building. I remain concerned about the visibility. I mean, the one particular slide that Mark showed of winter, a lot of the slides are taken in summer, that one, and the hedgerow and the trees are in leaf, and it is masked, that area is masked from the road. But in the winter, it is exposed. And I remain concerned about the exposure that that such a large building will have in an otherwise open and building less landscape.
I'd actually have a lot of sympathy with that, except to the extent that most people that are going to see it are going to be belting at about 60 miles an hour down the road, and actually not going to be concentrating on the landscape at that particular point because of the nature of the road. So that's which is part of the reason for the application when you think about it. But let's think about that. I've got Andrew Hart, and then I've got Bill. Andrew?
Chair, I passed down that road. I haven't done the site visit, but I passed down that road previously. And it's a bit like the 515. You know, they did about walk factor 4 as they pass the site, and nobody's looking really. They're concentrating on the road. And I remember when we did the solar panels at the crossroads on the 515, and you know, Tag Farm, and I think I'd agree with Ken. It's gone a long way, the applicant, to actually listen to what we said and taken on board quite a bit. He's made some substantial alterations. There's no doubt that he is... I know what it's like with people having to farm bits of land that are 1.5, 2, 3 miles away from the main farm, and it is very, very, very difficult to do so. You know, it's additional tractor journeys, and he said previously they've had problems with loading stuff to take it away from the site. It means that they can handle livestock and fodder on site, which is quite, from a farming point of view, quite attractive, and they're not having the journeys down the road. You know, people following a tractor doing 20 kilometres an hour with a trailer full of haylage. I'm very sympathetic to this, that he's actually gone a long way. And it's a reasonable design building. It's not horrendous by any means. And if it's not really going to be seen from the road, I'm struggling with this. Is it going to be a problem? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I've now got Bill and then Mike Chaplin.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was on the site visit yesterday. I think it's definitely, any building there would stand out in what is an open rolling landscape, regardless of any landscaping, which wouldn't have sort of minimal effect in the winter. And I'm just very concerned. I'm very, you know, we want to support the agricultural communities and businesses, but it just strikes me this landscape thing is so important, and we should sort of heed the advice of officers as well, who've got a very good understanding of that as well. But so I think the landscape thing is quite important, bearing in mind as well that any development on the site will inevitably and understandably also attract all the paraphernalia that's associated with buildings and farming and vehicles and increased vehicle movements and so on. So I think it's problematic and you know, it is not appropriate in that landscape setting. Would hopefully can work with the applicants to find you know, another solution if that I think we sort of touched on that yesterday as well.
Mike?
Yes, it's a question. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go on the site visit yesterday, and I was one of the people who was very keen to have a site visit there. So, but there was a clash. But the question is really about visibility in the landscape. What are the footpaths around there where this building would be seen from?
I think we've been told, first of all, that there are no footpaths, and if you look across it from the other side of the valley, apparently it's not a big issue. It's really about what you see as you drive along the road.
That is the main focus then. Thank you.
Ginny.
Thank you. I can see that there's a very clear agricultural need for this 30 acres portion, and that there's a lot of safety issues with moving stock, and it's not going to be a lot of vehicles coming. It's probably going to reduce the vehicles coming on and off the land. My question would be, is there anything that we could do or we could ask the applicant to do to improve the screening or to improve the appearance of what he's after?
Yeah, I think in terms of the screening, they've probably done what they can. We could try and get more copses of trees within the field, but given that it's given over to stock and we would need that planting to be effectively around the building, that might cause them some operational issues, I suspect. And given the elevations as well, probably wouldn't achieve a great deal more than we're already getting. In terms of the improvement to the appearance of the building, I think there is scope there. The cladding of the building at the moment is proposed as sheet metal in a dark blue colour. And whilst they've taken some advice in terms of bringing that cladding further down the sides of the building, at least to the more open elevations, it's still a metal sheet cladding which will be quite stark in that landscape. Typically, for more remote buildings where they can be supported, we would look at a vertical Yorkshire boarding, which will sort of weather down and soften in the landscape. Potentially as well, we've got sort of a ranch-style fencing proposed around the outside edge of the yard here, which doesn't reflect the materials we'd normally expect to see. So there might be scope for hedgerow planting immediately along the outside of that, which would soften the edges of the building as well as removing that type of fencing from the landscape. So I think we could deal with that by condition if members were minded to approve.
Andrew, you put your hand up.
Thank you for letting me come back. Post and rail could be temporary, subject to the planting of hawthorn hedges.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of the Yorkshire boarding, and I would be inclined to let it go through and pass it if we could stipulate in a condition that Yorkshire boarding was what we wanted in the way that we wanted it, and then insist on the actual hedge planting. I've got a lot of hedges, and hedges are marvellous. They take a little while, but also we're encouraging the wildlife as well, because hedges love wildlife, and wildlife love hedges. So that would be great. And I don't mind the odd fir tree here and there if it's the right kind.
So are you making that into a proposal?
I'm going to make that a proposal, yes.
Is that seconded by anyone? Ginny has seconded it. Has anybody else got any comments to make on this? In that case, I'll put it to the vote.
Do you want some draft conditions, Chair?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're going to say... draft conditions. I always forget about those.
Yorkshire boarding all the way up and down, as much as possible.
And hedging.
Mellow,
and lighting.
Post and rail fencing with hedges planted in amongst the post and rail.
Right, he's got those two.
Can I give a list?
We're going to add lighting, and you're going to give us some more.
3-year time limit for commencement, adopt the amended plans, a scheme of external lighting to be agreed, details of any spoil disposal to be agreed, given the slopes on this site and the amount of excavation required. We wouldn't want to see that disposed of on the site necessarily. For the building to be removed when it's no longer required for agricultural purposes, Yorkshire boarding to the walls of the building, and a hedgerow to the outer edge of the livestock handling area fence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair. Supported by a post and rail fence that may be not needed in the future.
That's what I think we've been told. Yeah, that's fine. Any further comments on that or amendments, Ken?
Just a thought, Chair. On the slides that Mark was showing, particularly the winter ones, there's an awful lot of wet on that land. Is there any need to address drainage with regard to the track or anything like that in order to maximise its longevity?
The applicant's actually put that forward along with justifications for the hard standing at the top of the building itself. So I think if it's simply a track at the bottom that's surfaced in the way they're proposing, they're comfortable with that would be sufficient.
Right, okay. So, Lee?
Just on that, will that cause any problem with the highway if we've got runoff?
We've got no suggestion the development itself would increase the runoff overall. The building is obviously quite, if I just go back to the site plan here. So the areas of hard standing, as it's proposed along here, this is a cart track style, so just two tracks of crushed stone, so they would remain permeable. The only place you're going to get the hard standing is, incidentally, this slide hasn't been updated, the building's facing the wrong way, but the only area of actual hard standing here is the building, the concrete area here, and the building which are well removed from the road. So I wouldn't expect that to have a significant impact on the highway given its position.
Right, okay. Well, on that basis, I'm going to put it to the... Yes?
I'm putting my hand up.
Oh, you're being presumptive.
I'm sorry, Chair.
On that basis, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour of permitting this on the terms outlined by Mark? Those against? Any abstentions? So that is carried. Mrs. Harrison, you have your planning permission.
All the cows and sheep will be out.
The last item on the agenda is the report of the head of law on planning appeals. Does anybody want to add anything to this report orally before? Has any member got any issue to raise on the report? All those in favour of noting the report? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you very much.